Hours of Jita bedtime gang lore. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks because this is a long one. You can lie back, let the map blur in your head, and we're just gonna talk about every major gang that ever mattered in Jita, from the PS2 era all the way up to Jita Online's player-run empires. We're tracing full life stories tonight. Origins, peak, and slow messy decline. From the green of Grove Street to the purple of the Ballas. From Liberty City's tired old Italian mafia to shiny new corporate cartels. You're going to hear how each crew starts as nobodies, scrapes its way to power, and then gets eaten by the same world it helped build. It's believed that by the end of this, you'll be able to look at any color on any corner and know exactly how it got there and how it's going to disappear. The style is simple, conversational, slightly dramatic, and basically one long continuous info dump with minimal pauses, like a bedtime story about invisible wars behind the missions. We're not doing mission guides, we're doing the stuff hiding between cutscenes. So we'll move gang by gang, city by city, like you're flipping through a criminal yearbook while trying not to fall asleep. We'll start in the Get to 3 era with Liberty City's mafias already past their glory days, because the game quietly explains they're clinging to docks and diners while new money and new drugs take over. Then Vice City's coke-fueled outfits, the biker gangs and the Cuban-Haitian conflict, all burning hot and fast before the credits roll. After that, San Andreas, where it's also revealed that Grove Street families were already broken by drugs and betrayal before you even press start, which explains why CJ comes home to a gang that feels more like a memory than a force. In reality, a lot of your favorite crews are already dying when you meet them. The Italian Mafia in GTA IV is powerful on paper, but every mission suggests they're old, paranoid, and being pushed out by Eastern European and Albanian outfits. The Lost MC looked tough in Liberty City, then you watch Trevor casually decapitate their Blaine County chapter in GTA V, turning a whole biker empire into a tutorial for what happens when you pick the wrong enemy. We'll also talk about how Jita Online quietly replaces most traditional street gangs with you. CEO offices, MC businesses, cartel-style drug labs. Rockstar basically retires half the NPC gangs and lets players become the new Ballas, Vagos, and Madrazos. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how powerless the old gangs start to look once weaponized millionaires begin falling out of the sky. If you stay awake, by the end you'll understand who truly runs Los Santos, Liberty City, and Vice City, and why most of these gangs were doomed from the start. And if you do fall asleep, you'll at least dream in gang colors. So, welcome back to the Jita Bedtime Files. You already know what this is by now. Long-form Jita lore that you can put on in the background while you're lying in bed, lights off, just letting Los Santos, Liberty City, and Vice City play out in your head like a really violent audiobook. This is that same style as the Steve Haynes and Vinewood episodes, but tonight we're narrowing the camera way down onto colors, corners, and crews. You're not just hearing about one corrupt fib agent or one washed-up actor. You're getting the whole life cycle of every gang you've driven past 1,000 times. From the first tag on a wall to the last body on the sidewalk. The tone stays chill, but the info is not. We're going dense with it. We're pulling from throwaway dialogue during drive-bys, radio news updates you probably muted, territory maps, graffiti, and tiny environmental details that Rockstar buried in alleys and safe houses. If you ain't sleeping, you're going to start noticing why a single green tag on a freeway pillar quietly explains a decade of family's history, or why one abandoned warehouse in Alderney suggests the Pegorinos were already finished before Nico ever showed up. Every segment after this is going to lock in on one gang, or a tight little cluster that lives off each other. We'll walk through their origin, how they first appear in the series, who's really calling the shots inside, and what their peak actually looks like when the money, drugs, and bodies are all flowing in the right direction. Then we follow the cracks, the bad deals, the internal beefs, the one mission where you, as the player, accidentally knock over the first domino. So when we talk about the families in Ballas and GTA V, we're also going to echo back to Grove Street families and Ballas in San Andreas, because it's believed that Rockstar wanted that war to feel familiar without making it literally the same paperwork. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how Grove Street canonically fell off before San Andreas even begins, and why Franklin's crew in V feels like the ghost of something that used to run the whole city. We'll be jumping between eras a lot. 1 minute you're in PS2 era Los Santos with CJ watching Grove Street collapse under crack and betrayal. The next you're in HD era Los Santos watching the Lost MC get decapitated by Trevor in a single cutscene. We'll compare old Liberty City mafias in GTA the 3 and the fading Pegorinos and Gambettis in IV. Then swing back to Vice City to see how pastel coke empires turned into background noise by the time online's weaponized millionaires show up. So, grab some snacks, pick your favorite gang in your head right now, and just let their colors sit there. By the time the credits roll on this episode, you'll know if they ended in triumph, quiet irrelevance, or the kind of tragedy that only gets mentioned in one bitter line of dialogue after the fact. And the way Rockstar decides who ends in tragedy and who just fades into background noise is actually pretty systematic. Gangs in GTA aren't just groups of angry NPCs with bad aim. They're like moving map legends. Colors, cars, accents, even the music on a block quietly tell you who owns what. And that ownership shifts as the story drags you through the city. You see it right away in San Andreas. Green Grove Street cul-de-sacs, purple Ballas cruising past, yellow Vagos hanging around alleys. The spray tags and outfits are loud on purpose, because Rockstar wants you to read the streets at a glance. In reality, that's the game teaching you the rules of its little ecosystem. This corner is safe. That alley is a drive-by waiting to happen. This warehouse is about to be full of guys yelling in 3 different languages. But almost every gang follows the same basic life cycle. First, they're background noise. You drive past them, maybe hear a line or two on the radio about some war you didn't start. Then the story zooms in. A conflict arc kicks off, and suddenly that gang is everywhere. Missions, cutscenes, ambushes, territory wars. After that peak, they start to evaporate. They lose turf, their leaders die, or they just stop being mentioned because the plot has moved on to a bigger fish. And when the next game shows up, that evaporation usually becomes a full reset. The mafia that felt untouchable in GTA 3 is already creaking and sidelined by the time you're dealing with the Pegorinos and Gambettis in GTA 4. The Lost MC go from starring in their own DLC to getting wiped out in Trevor's intro mission in V. It's believed that Rockstar likes this because it makes every city feel like it's been living a whole off-screen decade between games, even if you only see the aftermath in one throwaway line. Your actions are canonically the earthquake. When you take territories for Grove Street, when you sabotage the Russian mob in Orv, when Franklin helps the families hit the Ballas, the game doesn't always show a detailed epilogue, but the implication is clear. You've shifted the food chain. A dead capo, a burned stash house, a lost barrio, all of that stacks up into why a gang is weaker or missing when we see that city again later. Older games lean into cartoonish, color-blocked gangs because the satire is broad and loud. By the HD era, things get way more grounded and depressing. The families in V are fractured and broke. The Ballas are half corporate, half crack house. The cartels feel like distant investors rather than movie villains. It's also revealed that a lot of these new gangs are spiritual reboots of old ones, just stripped of the Saturday morning gangster vibe. And one of the most famous green versus purple wars in gaming? That one technically ends before you even press new game. If you ain't sleeping yet, the way that collapse plays out off screen explains almost everything about how San Andreas actually starts. And speaking of collapses that already happened by the time you spawn in, Liberty City actually gives you the opposite first. You start GTA 3, walking into a city where one gang has already won. On paper at least. Salvatore Leone is the old man at the top of that food chain. He's the Don of the Leone family, and during GTA 3, he's basically the unelected mayor of Liberty City. The Leones control construction unions, garbage contracts, protection rackets, and a huge chunk of the local politicians who just magically vote the way Salvatore wants. If you ain't sleeping, this is where you see Rockstar's idea of organized crime at full power before they start tearing it down in later games. The way they got there is very old school. The Leone family runs on that classic Italian mafia structure: Don, underboss, capos, soldiers, and a lot of guys in suits pretending they're legitimate businessmen. They've got alliances with other Liberty City families, like the Forellis and Sindacos during the earlier timeline, and it's believed that years of quiet deals and shared rackets are what let them lock down Portland Island. St. Mark's becomes their cozy suburban stronghold, with Salvatore's mansion sitting above the neighborhood like a church that does tax fraud. Down the hill you have the red light district, which they treat as an ATM that never closes. The brothels, the sex clubs, the protection money from every sleazy doorway, all of that runs through Leone hands. Missions like Luigi's Girls and Pump Action Pimp quietly explain how deep that control goes, because you're not just doing favors, you're cleaning up anyone who thinks they can operate on Leone turf without paying rent. But the thing with empires is that paranoia shows up way before the fall. Salvatore is already jumpy during GTA 3. He doesn't trust outsiders, and he really doesn't trust Claude, this silent, efficient, completely unreadable guy that his own people have brought in. It's also revealed that Salvatore's instinct is always to kill problems instead of adapt to them, which worked in the 70s, but in reality just speeds up his downfall in the 2000s. That's why you get moments like the car bomb setup outside the club. Salvatore invites you to dinner, then casually sends you to your own execution because someone whispered that you might be working with the Colombians. The twist is that Claude survives, and you end up taking the hit on Salvatore himself later, turning that mansion in St. Mark's into just another crime scene. This would make a lot more sense in the context of GTA 5, where the Italian mob is still around but clearly past its prime. Families like the Pegorinos and Ancelottes are clinging to old rituals, while Eastern European and Albanian outfits eat their lunch. The Leones in GTA 3 are the template for that. Peak mafia power, nice suits, big houses, zero flexibility. Rockstar shows you the rot starting inside the mansion, long before Nico Bellic ever lands at Francis International. And once you've seen the old guard lose their grip in Liberty City, the way newer gangs move into that vacuum starts to look very different. By the time you get to GTA 5, you're walking into Liberty City after the party's already over for the Italians. The suits are still pressed, the restaurants are still busy, but if you ain't sleeping, you can tell the mafia you heard about in GTA 3 is basically a museum piece now. You've got three main families on the board: the Gambettes, the Ancelottes, and the Pegorinos. The Gambettes are the old guard, the most traditional family, with guys like John Gravelli literally running things from a hospital bed. That detail alone explains a lot. The supposed king of Liberty City is hooked up to machines, doing business through IV drips and visiting hours. The Ancelottes sit in Algonquin trying to juggle old-school rackets with new-school pressures, constantly beefing with Albanian enforcers. And out in Alderney, you've got the Pegorinos, who are technically a family, but everyone else treats them like the weird cousin who still thinks it's 1987. Jimmy Pegorino is the clearest sign of the decline. He wants a commission seat so badly, it basically becomes his personality trait. It's believed that most of the respectable families see him as small time, a glorified suburb crew pretending to be national players, and that insult eats him alive during the story. Because he can't earn recognition through quiet power, he starts swinging wildly, backing risky deals, taking on enemies he can't afford, and trusting people he barely knows. In reality, his hunger to be seen as a real boss turns the Pegorinos into a cautionary tale. This is where you come in as Nico. He's not Italian, not connected, not part of the bloodlines these guys used to obsess over. But the families keep hiring him anyway. Nico does hits for the Pegorinos, the Gamberes, and the Enchiladas at different points, and nobody really cares that he's an outsider as long as he gets the job done. That shift suggests how desperate they are. When a centuries-old criminal tradition starts outsourcing its most sensitive work to a traumatized Eastern European immigrant it met last week, you're not looking at a healthy institution. It's also revealed that half the time they don't even know he's working for their rivals too. Around them, the city is changing. Russian outfits like Faustin's crew and then Dimitri's network start muscling into docks, drugs, and nightlife. Albanian gangs handle debt collection and muscle in Bohan and Broker. You also see Eastern European and Balkan groups controlling heroin pipelines the Italians used to own. The Italians still talk like landlords, but everyone else is already living in their house rent-free. And one particular family, trying to prove they still matter, is about to make a choice that drags in a biker gang, a warehouse, and one of the HD era's bloodiest nights. Grab some snacks, because their worst decision hasn't even happened yet. Except, that warehouse doesn't open on a quiet sit-down. It opens on the sound of straight pipes and someone throwing a beer bottle at a security camera. Because the Italians might be aging out, but Liberty City still has one gang that thinks subtlety is for cowards. The Lost Motorcycle Club is Liberty City's loud, chaotic answer to all those polished mafia boardrooms you've just been in. You go from suits and silk ties to patched leather cuts, prison ink, and guys who treat traffic laws as a rumor. The Lost were first really explored in The Lost and Damned, where you finally see how this biker gang actually functions when they're not just background noise roaring past your taxi. On paper, they're all about brotherhood. They call each other brothers, they live out of the clubhouse, and they treat the patch like religion. In reality, that brotherhood is soaked in meth, cheap booze, and constant paranoia. Their whole culture is bikes, bars, and backroom deals, and it's believed that if you're not willing to bleed for the club, you're just a wallet with legs. The tension at the top explains a lot. Billy Gray is the old school president, a walking relapse who thinks chaos and violence are how you prove the laws still matter. Johnny Klebitz is the vice president who's been quietly keeping the club alive while Billy's in rehab, trying to move them into more stable money and less suicidal beefs. The second Billy gets out, that fragile balance snaps. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how every old gang in Liberty City is afraid of becoming irrelevant, and Billy is basically that fear on a Harley. They carve out a niche in a city already stuffed with mafia families and Eastern European outfits by weaponizing mobility and intimidation. The Lost don't need high-rises or restaurants as fronts, their clubhouse, their bikes, and a convoy of screaming exhausts are enough. They'll swarm a deal, surround a car, or roll up 10 deep to a meeting just to make sure everyone knows they're willing to die over a bad look. During The Lost and Damned, it's also revealed that their alliances and enemies are a mess. They cut deals with the Angels of Death one minute, then blow them up the next. They get tangled with the Enchiladas, the Triads, and various drug suppliers. And every time Billy chooses pride over profit, the list of people who want the Lost dead gets longer. And then, pattern break. You go from cold, smoky mafia backrooms to a neon-lit biker bar where someone's doing coke off a pool table while a TV in the corner plays Weasel News. That chaos doesn't stay in Liberty City either. If you ain't sleeping, you already know those same cuts and that same logo will show up again in Blaine County, older, weaker, and about to ride straight into Trevor Phillips' idea of conflict resolution. The choices they make here, in Liberty City, are the reason that out in the desert, years later, one bad night can erase almost an entire chapter of Lost MC history in a single mission. The Lost MC in Liberty City looks tough on the outside, but if you ain't sleeping, you know they're already rotting from the inside out. By the time those cuts show up in Blaine County, the damage was done years earlier, on dirty sidewalks under the Algonquin Bridge. Billy Gray is the official president of the Lost MC Alderney chapter, just out of rehab, and he rides back in like a rock star who thinks relapse is a personality trait. Johnny Klebitz is the acting president who kept the club running while Billy was locked up, and he's the one who actually cares about stability, money, and not dying over a bag of bad crank. That split is the core problem. Billy wants chaos and glory. Johnny wants business and survival. The game immediately shows you the tension. Billy drags the club back into a war with the Angels of Death because he wants to reclaim stolen bikes and reputation, while Johnny had already negotiated a truce. Billy's addiction and ego make him treat every slight like a holy war, and that poisons the clubhouse, because half the guys worship the old Billy, and the other half quietly agree with Johnny, but won't say it out loud. During missions like Clean and Serene and Angels in America, you're basically watching Johnny mop up after Billy. Billy turns what could have been a simple pickup into a shootout. He pushes meth and heroin deals with sketchy Liberty City crews, and he keeps escalating until the Lost aren't just beefing with the Angels of Death. They're brushing up against guys connected to the Pegorinos and other organized outfits. It's also revealed that Billy is skimming and cutting side deals, which explains why the money never quite matches the risk. Johnny is constantly the damage control guy. In Bad Cop Drop, he has to help move heroin that's already hot because Billy couldn't keep his mouth shut. In This Shit's Curse, the heroin turns out to be tied to the Triads and the Italian mob, and Johnny is stuck in the middle of a drug package that keeps changing owners, while Billy just blames everyone else. This would make a lot more sense in the context of a stable president, but Billy is actively sabotaging his own club to feed his habit and his pride. The big fracture comes when Billy sells Johnny out, getting himself arrested while trying to pin the heroin mess on him. It's believed that Billy was ready to let the entire Alderney chapter burn if it meant he walked free. The Lost survive the Lost and Damned, but only technically. Brian forms a breakaway faction, trust inside the clubhouse is shot, and they've made enemies with Angels of Death, mob families, and street crews who don't forget. In reality, by the end, Johnny is riding with a smaller, paranoid, exhausted club that thinks it's weathered its worst storm. They patch up, they relocate some members, they keep the brand alive. Out in the desert, though, a different Lost chapter is spinning its wheels, waiting for a man in a dirty white tank top who doesn't care about truces, rehab, or brotherhood. And when he finally notices them, all that Liberty City drama is going to feel like the calm part of the story. Out in Blaine County, the Lost MC try to do what every fading gang does, pretend the desert is a fresh start. The Blaine chapter sets up around Stab City, a busted trailer park that looks like a Liberty City clubhouse put through a meth tornado. Same patched vests, same talk about brotherhood and code, but the place is held together with hangovers and paranoia, instead of Billy and Johnny's old school hierarchy. They run crank, they party with the local drifters, they shake down small-time dealers. On paper, it's a clean expansion. In reality, it's a dumping ground for guys who either washed out of better chapters or never made the cut back east. The way they treat Ashley Butler, the constant infighting, the casual talk about lost shipments, all suggest this is the Lost with even less discipline than the Liberty crew you saw implode in IV and The Lost and Damned. Then the camera hard cuts to Trevor Phillips. Your first time playing him, you're dropped right into that crossover moment where TV static becomes canon. Trevor's watching a news report about Michael's death being a lie. He hears the name, he hears about North Yankton, and something in his head snaps into focus. While he's processing that, Johnny Klebitz walks up, strung out, trying to play the tough, betrayed ex. You know what happens next. Johnny gets in Trevor's face, mumbling about respect and Ashley, and Trevor just caves his skull in. No build-up, no cutscene duel, just a stomp that quietly ends the entire Liberty City arc of the Lost MC on a dirt road in the desert. If you ain't sleeping by this point, grab some snacks, because this is a long one emotionally for anyone who played The Lost and Damned. After that, Trevor decides it's not just personal, it's territorial. The intro mission has you ride with him and Ron straight into Stab City. The game lets you see it like a documentary of extinction, bikers scrambling for their choppers, trailers going up in flames, guys screaming about falling back while Trevor rams them off the highway in a rusty truck. It's also revealed that the Blaine County leadership is basically wiped out in one night, their meth operation torched, their safe spot turned into a bonfire. By the time the smoke clears, the Lost are done as a serious power in Blaine County. You still see scattered bikers on the highway or guarding tiny stashes later, but they're reduced to random enemies, not a faction. The game quietly explains their status by how they act. No more sit-downs, no more negotiations, just revenge ambushes that go nowhere. And that's the tragedy. This is a gang that survived Billy's betrayal, Liberty City politics, and multiple civil wars. But they can't survive one unhinged guy in a tank top with a truck, a shotgun, and a very bad attitude. It's believed that this is Rockstar's way of saying some empires don't fall to rival institutions or grand conspiracies. Sometimes they just pick the wrong neighbor. The desert remembers that, even if the patches don't. The desert remembers. But Vice City glows so bright, it tries to make you forget anything older than last night's deal. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because we're dropping into 1980s Vice City, where the war isn't Lost MC versus Trevor in the dust. It's Cubans versus Haitians under pink neon and a cocaine haze. Vice City is Rockstar's Miami analog during the height of the drug boom, and that explains a lot. You've got Little Havana and Little Haiti sitting almost back to back. Two immigrant neighborhoods turned pressure cookers, with pastel hotels and speedboats on one side, and poverty and resentment on the other. The streets look like postcards, but every alley suggests a drop spot, a stash house, or somebody's cousin waiting with a Tech 9. Humberto Robina is the loudspeaker of Little Havana. He runs the Cubans, also called Los Cabrones, and he's constantly overcompensating about courage because he's terrified of being seen as weak. His gang is proud and very vocal about protecting their community, talking about honor and Cuban pride during almost every mission. At the same time, they're muscling into smuggling routes, boat-based gun running, and protection rackets aimed at anyone who wants to move product through the docks. In reality, they're half community defense force, half small-time cartel trying to level up. Across the canal you get the Haitians, led by Auntie Poulet, who is the exact opposite energy. Where Humberto shouts, she whispers. Her crew uses this voodoo-flavored mystique, burning incense, chicken bones, and a lot of implied curses to keep people off balance. It's also revealed that she doesn't just manipulate with superstition. She literally drugs Tommy Vercetti's tea and uses him like a remote-controlled enforcer for a while. The game never fully spells out what she doses him with, but it's believed that those hazy mission intros are Tommy basically blacking out between hits. Because you're playing as Tommy, your involvement tips the balance harder than any in world politics. One moment you're blowing up Haitian drug operations for the Cubans, The next, you're torching Cuban vehicles under Antipule's orders, all while Tommy barely remembers why he agreed. This would make a lot more sense in the context of a neutral fixer story, but in Vice City, you're basically a one-man demographic weapon. By the time Tommy snaps out of Anti's control and starts cutting his own deals, both gangs have lost people, territory, and momentum they never really get back. Rockstar never gives you a neat epilogue for them. After Vice City, the Cubans and Haitians don't show up as major players again. They're either background references or gone. That pattern is important. Vice City's ethnic street crews blaze bright for one specific era, then vanish or get radically reimagined in the HD timeline, just like how Grove Street and the Ballas get spiritual successor versions in GTA V instead of direct continuations. It suggests Rockstar likes treating these gangs as time-locked snapshots. And if you follow that logic, the next city we hit shows what happens when a snapshot turns into a full-blown generational saga. And if you follow that logic, the next city we hit shows what happens when the gang is literally just the main character's ego with a payroll. Vice City doesn't just give you a crew. It slowly hands you the whole food chain. Tommy Vercetti starts as a Liberty City hitter doing time for the Forellas, but by the time you're done, he's something different. The Vercetti gang isn't introduced like the Families or the Ballas. It's not a color-coded street set. It's this weird emergent blob of hired muscle, ex-gangsters, lawyers, club managers, and dock workers who all end up orbiting one guy because he's the only one still standing after the bloodbath. If you ain't sleeping, this is a long one in terms of how much power creep he goes through. Early on, you're just doing cleanup for a failed coke deal. But each mission quietly builds infrastructure. You take over the Ocean View, then the mansion from Diaz, then the Malibu Club, the print works, the boatyard, the taxi firm, the cherry popper factory. Every property you buy is also revealed as a front, a safe house, or a way to wash drug money. In reality, Rockstar is teaching you that territory in Vice City isn't just blocks on a map. It's ownership papers and keys. During that climb, the existing gangs get pushed to the side. The Cubans and Haitians are busy shooting each other. But Tommy is the one who ends up owning the docks, the distribution routes, and the assassination contracts. Diaz's crew doesn't get a graceful decline. You walk in, kill the boss, and his men either die or quietly become Vercetti gang goons in Hawaiian shirts. It's believed that even some ex-Forelli associates end up working under him, because the money is better and Liberty City is too hot. By the final mission, you're not doing a scrappy gang war. You're defending a crime campus. The mansion shootout with Sonny's men plays like a last stand for a cartel boss, not a street captain. Your gang functions more like a private army than a neighborhood crew, with security posted at the gates, guys on the stairs, and business fronts across the city feeding into your empire. The game's ending strongly suggests Tommy becomes the de facto kingpin of Vice City, with Lance's betrayal just confirming that he's now big enough to have internal coups. But unlike the Leone family or the Lost MC, you never see the Vercetti gang fall. There's no on-screen collapse, no GTA V radio segment about a washed-up Tommy. Their decline is meta. It happens when later games reset the map, jump timelines, and quietly act like this specific Vice City power structure is locked in 1986. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how Rockstar treats protagonists in general, because these empires usually end not with a bang in lore, but with the camera moving to a new city, a new console generation, and a new main character. And the next stop shows what happens when that spotlight hits Liberty City again, and the gangs have to share space with the whole immigrant underworld. So before we dive into green bandanas and cul-de-sac shootouts, you kind of need a bird's eye view of the whole zoo you've been driving through. If you ain't sleeping yet, this is where the map in your head finally lines up with the years on the loading screens. You started in the early 2000s Liberty City of GTA 3, where the Italian Mafia was at its peak on that timeline. Salvatore Leone and his guys were basically the final boss of organized crime, using the Yakuza, Yardis, and Diablos like disposable tools because the old-school family still controlled the docks, the construction rackets, and most of the politicians. Then, you jumped forward a console generation but backward in Mafia prestige with GTA IV, where it's revealed that the Pegorinos are begging to get a seat at the big table, while the enchiladas and gambetas are already fading, pushed on all sides by Russians, Albanians, and every other immigrant crew that sees them as soft. Running alongside that, in the HD era, you had the Lost MC. In IV, they look like a proper outlaw institution, doing gun deals with the Angels of Death and trying to act like they're above street gangs. After Trevor meets them in Blaine County, it's believed that most of their leadership becomes fertilizer behind a trailer, which explains why by GTA Online, they feel more like scattered side mission fodder than a serious power. But if you zoom the camera back in time, the whole thing starts in the neon 1980s of Vice City. That's where you saw ethnic street wars between Cubans and Haitians, drug-running biker gangs, and the Vance cartel getting eaten alive from the inside. Tommy Vercetti walks in, wipes out the old suppliers, and turns Vice City into a one-man corporate cartel with Hawaiian shirts. This would make a lot more sense in the context of what comes next, because the next stop on the timeline is early 1990 San Andreas. Pattern interrupt here. Forget mafia dons and coked-up kingpins for a second. Think front yards, lowriders, and half-broken payphones. San Andreas is the pivot point. It sits right between the 80s cartel fantasy of Vice City and the post-9/11 cynicism of IV. And it's the first time the main characters are straight-up street gangs. Grove Street families, Ballas, Vagos, Varios los Aztecas. The game treats their colors like factions in an actual war. It's also revealed that Grove Street have already fallen off before the story even starts because of crack, internal betrayal, and deals with corrupt cops. So when you remember them as this unstoppable green army, in reality they're starting from one of the lowest points any GTA protagonist crew ever gets. From that 80s Vice City glow, to 90s Los Santos block wars, to 2000s Liberty City mafias, and finally to the HD era where GTA V and online turned crime into a corporate startup simulator. Every era quietly reshuffles who's on top. Mafias give way to cartels, cartels to street gangs to biker clubs, and then to faceless shell companies, private security, and players running drug empires from office chairs. Grab some snacks, because next you're going back to where that green versus purple legend actually begins, and it's a lot more desperate than the memes make it look. You load into San Andreas thinking you're about to join the legendary green army of the memes. In reality, by the time CJ steps out of that taxi, the Grove Street families are already on life support. Grove Street is supposed to be the iconic green-clad gang of Los Santos. Kids on BMXs, lowriders bouncing, the cul-de-sac as this untouchable fortress. It's believed that a few years before the game, that image was actually true. Grove held big chunks of Ganton, Jefferson, Idlewood, and beyond, and the Ballas were the ones creeping around the edges. But when you arrive, you see an empty street, boarded up houses, one car in the driveway, and sweet yelling because half the homies don't even show up anymore. The fall starts before you ever touch a controller. During the late 80s and early 90s, crack money floods Los Santos. Every gang has a choice: get rich off hard drugs or try to keep some kind of code. Sweet and the old Grove leadership decide to stay away from that trade. That sounds noble, but in the GTA universe, morality is just another way to lose territory. The Ballas embrace crack, hook up with suppliers, and suddenly they've got guns, cars, and cops in their pockets. The game never gives you a full cutscene of this shift, but dialogue all over suggests Grove used to be bigger and fell off because they refused to poison their own people. On top of that, you've got internal betrayal. It's also revealed that Big Smoke and Ryder, two of the faces you associate with Grove, are already working against the gang before CJ gets home. Smoke sees the money in crack and the power and backing from CRASH, the corrupt anti-gang unit. Ryder tags along, half true believer, half clown with a gun. Because they quietly side with the Ballas and crooked cops like Tenpenny and Pulaski, every Grove move is sabotage from the inside. Look at the early game visuals if you ain't sleeping and actually pay attention. Grove's cul-de-sac feels weirdly quiet for a supposedly active gang chew. You drive a block or two out, and Ballas cars are just casually cruising, purple deep in what used to be green turf. Tags you spray over are right next to your home, which explains that Grove once painted the whole area and then lost it back, piece by piece. Missions like the early drive-bys are framed as taking back streets, not conquering them for the first time. So by the time the story starts, the war everyone remembers between families and Ballas, that's not Grove's golden age. That's a desperate comeback tour, already rigged from the inside, with half the roster sold out before you even pick up your first green jersey. So when you drop back into Los Santos with CJ, you're not building an empire from scratch. You're clocking in for Grove Street's comeback tour. Early on, the game quietly turns you into Sweet's campaign manager. Tagging up turf, cleaning the hood, drive-through, all of that is about repainting history in green, one wall and one block at a time. You roll with Sweet to hit ballot tags, and every time CJ climbs a billboard or sneaks into an alley with that spray can, the game literally erases purple and replaces it with green. It looks cosmetic, but it explains how the story sees reputation, paint first, power later. Then you start recruiting homies, 2-3 guys at a time, piling them into a Greenwood for those early drive-bys. The missions where you slide past Bala corners and light up the car are framed as wins, and the game rewards you with that little morale boost from the hood cheering when you get back. After a few of these, the map itself starts changing. Turf wars unlock, and suddenly you're defending cul-de-sacs in Ganton, pushing into Glen Park, and bleeding the Ballas out of Idlewood. You watch the radar slowly fill with green, and for a minute it really does feel like Grove is back. The phone calls from Sweet get more confident, Ryder talks louder, and even Big Smoke is out on the block pretending he's still about that life. If you ain't sleeping, you can grind those wars until half of Los Santos is your personal victory screen. But under all that, the tension is already there. Sweet is obsessed with the hood, and nothing but the hood, while CJ is being pulled into bigger circles. After the trip to see Cesar, after you start dealing with people like OG Locke's music dreams and Catalina's robberies, CJ gets exposed to money and opportunity outside Ganton. Sweet sees that as distraction, almost betrayal, because in his head, if you're not standing on Grove Street, you're standing against it. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how many times he's watched people leave and never come back. In reality, that comeback is built on sand. It's believed that Smoke and Ryder are already meeting with the Ballas and CRASH during this resurgence, locking in drug routes and protection deals while you're out repainting walls. The more turf you take, the more valuable Grove looks as a front, which also makes the betrayal more profitable. It's also revealed that Tenpenny and Pulaski are basically letting this green wave happen just so they can pull the plug at the perfect moment. That moment is the Mulholland intersection setup. The fake meet, the drive-by on Sweet's car, the cops swarming in right after the bullets stop flying. Sweet gets arrested, CJ gets dragged out to the countryside by CRASH, and the map you just turned green suddenly doesn't matter. Grove's comeback tour ends overnight, and CJ's exile is where the real cost of that fake resurgence starts to show. So that Mulholland setup you just heard about isn't just a cool mission. That's the night Grove Street really dies for the second time. You roll up thinking it's just another retaliation. Sweet on the overpass, CJ backing him up, Ballas supposedly rolling into a trap. During the cutscene, the radio chatter, the sudden flood of purple cars, you can feel it's off. The Ballas don't fight like they're surprised. They fight like they're on a schedule. And right after the last car blows up and Sweet is bleeding out on that ramp, the sirens hit on cue. C. Brassage doesn't arrive late. They arrive perfectly on time like they were on the group text. This is where it's also revealed that the betrayal wasn't just Grove got lazy and did drugs. Big Smoke and Ryder were the missing piece. You've already seen Smoke's mansion, Ryder hanging with Ballas, the weird tension before this mission. Mulholland just confirms what the game has been hinting at. Your childhood friends are now logistics for the enemy. Smoke runs crack and money through Ballas territory. Ryder backs him up, and CRHH keeps the heat pointed away from them because Tenpenny needs his cut. It's believed that the whole ambush only works because Smoke and Ryder can predict exactly how Sweet will react and exactly how far CJ will go to protect him. Sweet gets arrested on the spot. CJ doesn't even get that luxury. CRASH throws him in a car, drives him out past the city lights, and dumps him in the countryside with a broken bike and a burning car as his welcome gift. In reality, that's not just a funny reset button. That's the leadership of Grove Street being decapitated in one night. Sweet is in a cell, CJ is in exile, and the only Grove left in Los Santos are scattered soldiers with no orders. After that, the map you painted green turns purple and yellow again. Ballas push back into Idlewood and Jefferson. Vagos creep further south, and any neutral space becomes open season. The game doesn't show every block changing hands, but mission dialogue suggests Grove basically collapses into a rumor. While you're doing odd jobs for Catalina, Woozy, and random farmers, Los Santos is rewriting its gang hierarchy without you. When you finally come back, you can recapture turf, you can free Sweet, you can even push Ballas off the cul-de-sac. But that unseen golden age, the era when Grove supposedly ran half the city before the drugs, never comes back. The cops know your faces. The crack economy isn't going away, and Smoke's empire just shifts into different hands. Grove survives, but it's more like a stubborn local brand than a true citywide power. And if you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks for this part, because that's not even the worst version of their future. When you revisit Los Santos in Gitavi and drive past that same cul-de-sac, what's waiting on Grove Street suggests their story doesn't end with a defeat. It ends with something a lot colder than that. When you pull back up to Grove Street in Gitavi, the first thing you feel is that something's wrong with your memory. The cul-de-sac looks the same, the bend in the road is the same, the freeway hum is the same, but the colors are all backwards. In the HD continuity, Rockstar wiped the slate and started fresh, so technically the Grove Street families you knew in San Andreas aren't the exact same organization. New timeline, new canon. But the game also doesn't really pretend you forgot. The whole families versus Ballas setup in GTA V is a spiritual sequel, a remix of the same war, just with the serial numbers filed off so they can rewrite history without being trapped by it. You meet the modern families through Franklin. He runs with the Forum Drive set at first, and it's revealed that his little corner of Strawberry is just one branch in a broken tree. You've got the Chamberlain gangster families down by Davis, the Carson Avenue families closer to Rancho, and the Forum Drive families trying to hold their block together. They all rock green, they all talk about loyalty and old school rules, and they all hate the Ballas on principle, but in reality they're more like rival franchises than one united gang. The Chamberlain set is the most active on the street, always in beef, always posted up near the church and the projects. Carson Avenue is a bit more low-key, squeezed between Vagos and Ballas pressure. Forum Drive is stuck in the middle, And that explains why Franklin is already tired of the lifestyle when you meet him. He's in a gang that's supposed to be legendary, but it's mostly payday loans, repo jobs, and half-failed robberies. Then you drive to actual Grove Street. Pattern interrupt. The green heart of San Andreas? In GTA V, it's straight up Ballas turf. Purple jerseys, purple bandanas, Ballas tags on the walls, Ballas cars in CJ's old driveway. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks and just park there for a second, because that one visual quietly tells you an entire off-screen history. Whatever Grove used to be, it lost. Fans have tried to fill in the blanks. It's believed that the original Grove Street families were either absorbed into the Ballas after years of losing ground, or they splintered so hard that the name stopped meaning anything. Some people think a few survivors became the modern family sets, just older heads who moved a few blocks over and pretended it was a strategic decision. Others point at the drug angle from San Andreas and say the gang probably just rotted from the inside, one rock at a time, until the city and the cops didn't even need to finish the job. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how Rockstar treats gangs in general. Legends don't retire, they just get rewritten. By the time of Tavi, Grove Street as a power is gone, but its ghost is everywhere, in the green jerseys, in the way Lamar talks about respect, in the street names you drive past without thinking. Only the colors survive, drifting from crew to crew, while the original story gets buried under new beefs and new timelines. And if you ain't sleeping yet, this is where the bedtime story gets a little twisted. Because while Grove Street fades into myth, their old enemies just keep quietly cashing in. The Ballas are what happens when a gang treats the streets like a business instead of a family photo. In San Andreas, the Ballas are introduced as Grove Street's primary rivals, but they're not just the purple version of the same crew. They're better funded, they're already deep into hard drugs, and they've got friends in places CJ can't even see when he first comes home. While Swede is still clinging to that old-school no crack on the block code, the Ballas are riding around in purple Majestics and Tahomas, paid for by product that's eating the neighborhood alive. The game never sits you down and explains their balance sheet, but every drive-by and every purple corner suggests they're winning the war before you even pick up a gun. Their real power spike starts when Big Smoke and Ryder flip. Big Smoke is technically still a Grove Street OG, but it's also revealed that he's cutting deals behind everyone's back, and those deals run straight through the Ballas and CRS Tempenny, and Pulaski use Smoke as the middleman. Cops supply protection, Ballas move the crack, Smoke builds his empire, and Grove Street gets hollowed out from the inside. That's why you see Ballas posted in territories that used to be green, and why they can roll deep without worrying about sirens, when the same cops who are supposed to raid you are literally chauffeuring your product. You're not a gang anymore. You're a protected asset. This would make a lot more sense in the context of GTA V when you drive back to that famous cul-de-sac and realize who owns it now. In reality, the Ballas are one of the few San Andreas era crews who feel like they actually survived into the HD timeline. You've got the Forum Drive Ballas, the Covenant Avenue Ballas. Different sets with their own colors and slang, but the vibe is the same. Purple still runs key blocks in South Los Santos, including the former Grove Street home base. Franklin lives right on the fault line of that history, stuck between Lamar's nostalgia for the families and the very real fact that the Ballas are still outside, still posted, still dangerous. During missions like Chop, Hood Safari, and the later ambushes where Franklin and Lamar get set up on Balla turf, it's believed that you're seeing the aftershocks of that old war. The Ballas take losses, sure, but they never feel like they're on the verge of extinction. They feel entrenched, like roaches in the drywall of Los Santos. Every time you think you've wiped a set, another purple car pulls up at the next intersection. So when you zoom out and look at the whole series, The uncomfortable part is that the Ballas kind of win. They get the crack money, they get the cop protection, they get Grove Street's old address, and they're still around in GTAV, while the heroes are either dead, retired, or arguing on social media. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because the next gangs we're about to cover raise an even darker question. In a city like Los Santos, what does winning actually look like when the people who play the dirtiest are the only ones left standing? So while the Ballas are out here looking like the undefeated champs of purple real estate, you slide a little south and see their supposed rivals, the modern families. On paper, they're the green team. In reality, they're three different arguments wearing the same color. You've got the Chamberlain gangster families holding down Davis, and that stretch around the hospital, trying to act like the old heads and real successors to Grove Street. Then the Forum Drive families, Franklin's people, posted up in Strawberry on those apartment blocks where every balcony looks like a mixtape cover. And finally, the Carson Avenue set down in Rancho, closer to the Vagos, which already suggests how messy things can get because they're beefing sideways as much as they're beefing up the street. Each set has its own leadership, its own priorities, and its own version of what being families even means now. Chamberlain wants respect and tradition. Forum Drive wants money and survival. Carson is half looking at the Mexican gangs and trying not to get swallowed. Nobody's really in charge of all three. That lack of unified leadership echoes Grove Street's old problems, where you had Sweet obsessed with turf and honor, while Ryder and Big Smoke were literally in bed with the Ballas and the crack trade. It's believed that the same disease just mutated, less obvious betrayal, more quiet selfishness, and short-term thinking. Franklin Clinton is basically the poster child for this in G2V. He grows up Forum Drive families, runs with Lamar, does the little robberies, does the petty stuff, but he's always looking at Vinewood Hills like it's another planet. During the early missions, Simeon even jokes about Franklin trying to be big man while still stuck in Strawberry. This would make a lot more sense in the context of his set. The younger guys are caught between old school loyalty and this constant pressure to escape, to become something other than the next dead homie on a mural. When you look at the missions, the internal beef turns into actual body counts. The Hood Safari mission is supposed to be a simple drug deal with the Ballas, but because Lamar is reckless, Franklin is skeptical, and nobody's really coordinating with Chamberlain or Carson, it explodes into a three-way shootout with Ballas and cops. Later, during the long stretch, you see Stretch manipulating Lamar into another doomed meetup, which is also revealed as basically a setup. Miscommunication, ego, and old grudges turn every opportunity into an ambush. The Ballas move like one gang. The families move like three group chats that all got muted. So while they're arguing over who really runs Davis, the actual map of power in Los Santos is starting to shift. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks. Because while these guys are dying over corners, a different kind of gang, suited up, corporate, almost invisible, is quietly taking over the city's real money. And you've already done missions for them without even realizing who you were really working for. Those suited up, corporate, almost invisible gangs are scary. But the streets still matter, and in Los Santos, that street war has a very specific accent. Before the fib memos and Life Invader stock scams, you had lowriders, yellow bandanas, and Spanish shouting over Tech 9 fire. The Los Santos Vagos in San Andreas are your classic nightmare neighbors. They're one of the biggest Latino gangs in the state, rocking yellow, holding big chunks of East Los Santos and the beach, and they're tight with the boss. That alliance explains why, during Grove Street's comeback, you're constantly seeing purple and yellow rolling together in drive-bys. Vagos are deep in the crack trade, they're running drugs through alleyways and motels, and they're absolutely fine with spraying up family barbecues if it means holding a block. On the other side, you've got Varios los Aztecas, led by Cesar Villalpando. Cesar is technically a gang leader, but he's also one of the only people in San Andreas who seems to have a working moral compass. His crew is proud, lowrider obsessed, and way more about honor and respect than about poisoning their own neighborhoods. At first, they clash hard with CJ because Grove and Aztecas don't mix, and CJ's dating Cesar's cousin Kendall. That tension suggests this is going to be just another color-coded feud. But after CJ sees how Cesar moves, they become allies. Cesar helps expose Ryder and Big Smoke's betrayal. He rides with you on some of the nastier missions. And it's also revealed that Aztecas don't touch crack in the same way the Vagos do. In reality, San Andreas sets them up as two paths for Latino gangs, Vagos sinking deeper into the drug trade, selling out everything for money, and Aztecas trying to hold on to some kind of code, even while they're still absolutely down for a shootout in a parking lot. Fast forward to Quita V, and you see which path really won. The modern Los Santos Vagos are a serious Mexican organization now, not just loud neighbors in East LS. They're involved in meth, weapons, and cross-border operations, using stash houses, tunnels, and docks. They clash with Trevor Phillips multiple times because he's muscling into Blaine County meth, and missions like Trevor Phillips Industries and Crystal Maze show you Vagos as one of the few street gangs that can actually field numbers against Trevor's chaos. Then you suddenly cut out to the Aztecas in GTA V, and it's not who you expect. If you ain't sleeping, this would make a lot more sense in the context of a tragedy. The Aztecas now are a small, mostly rural outfit in Blaine County, led by Ortega, running a little meth and some guns out of trailers and scrapyards. They're not the urban lowrider kings anymore. They're background noise in Trevor's origin story. It's believed that something happened off-screen between games, some slow bleed of members and territory, because by the time you meet them, Trevor can literally tip Ortega's trailer into a river, and that's basically their whole arc. So while Vagos evolve into a cross-border power, the Aztecas quietly deflate into a cautionary footnote, and the real question is, who's waiting to do the same thing to Vagos in the next era? And the answer to that who's next question is pretty simple once you hit GTA V's story. It's not another set of guys in green or purple. It's a man in a polo shirt on a golf course. Martin Madrazo is introduced as this calm, almost polite cartel boss, but the game makes it clear right away that he's the scariest person in the room. He doesn't need a block, he has a ranch in the Vinewood Hills, a luxury home with guards and art on the walls, and he shows up to Michael's place like he's just dropping by a neighbor's barbecue. In reality, that first meeting where Michael gets his nose broken for wrecking Madrazo's girlfriend's house explains the entire power shift. Old gangs get drive-bys. Madrazo does quiet, personal visits. Madrazo's organization is built like a corporation instead of a hood crew. He has lawyers on call, politicians in his pocket, and a Rolodex full of judges and cops who suddenly forget what they saw. It's also revealed that he runs witness intimidation, construction rackets, and land deals, not just cocaine. When you dig into his dialogue and the news reports, it's believed that he's tied to disappearances, blackmail, and contract killings that never even make it onto Weasel News, because the right people are already paid off. The colors he flies are bank wires and legal documents. This is why even the protagonists tread carefully. Michael is a retired heister who sold out his old crew. Trevor is a complete maniac. Franklin is willing to rob armored cars, but all three of them are visibly nervous around Martin. During the missions where you kidnap Javier Madrazo from a party in Vinewood, or blow up the O'Neill brothers' meth lab on Martin's orders, the game suggests that they're not partners, they're assets. Old school gangs like the Families and Ballas spray bullets in the street, Madrazo makes a phone call, and an entire clan in Blaine County becomes a smoking crater. You can see the contrast really clearly if you ain't sleeping and you remember Franklin's early missions. Families vs. Ballas is loud, messy, and public. Drive-bys, arguments on porches, shouting about respect. When Madrazo gets involved, the violence moves to remote farmhouses, private jets, and quiet executions. This would make a lot more sense in the context of modern cartel stories than classic Gita gang wars, and Rockstar leans into that. The joke is that the guys arguing over Davis turf are already outdated, they just don't know it yet. By the time Michael and Trevor are hiding out on Madrazo's farm, building the Merryweather heist just to pay him back, you realize something. Even major gangs can't touch that level of influence. And if you grab some snacks and jump into GTA Online, the game basically hands that model to you, turning your character into the next invisible, corporate-style gang boss with offices, nightclubs, and shell companies instead of a corner and a tag. Because the future of GTA crime isn't about who owns Grove Street. It's about who owns the city's entire supply chain. And if you follow that supply chain far enough, you keep bumping into the same logo in different cities and different decades. The Triads. They're one of the few GTA gangs that feel like an actual multinational corporation, not just some guys on a block with matching colors. Back in GTA 3's Liberty City, the Triads are introduced as these disciplined, almost boringly efficient operators in Portland. They control the docks, the fish factories, and a big chunk of the city's heroin and protection rackets, and the game quietly suggests that this isn't some new crew. This is an old machine that's already been running for years before you show up. They're not tagging walls or doing drive-bys for fun. They're guarding shipments, moving product through the harbor, and trying to keep a low enough profile that the cops stay focused on louder idiots like the Leone family. Then you get to Chinatown Wars, and the camera zooms in on how that machine actually works. Wu Uncle Kenny Lee is your main Triad boss, and he's basically the anti-Trevor. He's calm, patient, and obsessed with hierarchy, and it's also revealed that his real priority is long-term profit and family reputation, not winning every street beef. He'll take a temporary loss if it keeps the organization stable, and this would make a lot more sense in the context of how often other Liberty City gangs implode because of ego. The Triads in that game run drugs at scale, manage safe houses, and treat loyalty like currency. Betrayal isn't just personal, it's bad business. By the time you hit GTA V and online, the names change, but the playbook doesn't. In Los Santos you see Triad-linked outfits like the Wei Chang organization, and later Tao Chang's more chaotic version. And in reality they're doing the exact same thing as Liberty City's crews, just with better weather and worse tourists. They manufacture meth, move cocaine, and get into weapons trafficking, and it's believed that some of the smuggling lines you use as a player are just you renting space in their pipeline. Once GTA Online expands, they slide into nightclub ownership, counterfeit cash, and even casino-adjacent business through contacts like Tao and the Chings, because if you ain't sleeping, you've probably run their missions at 3 a.m. for quick cash. The reason they're still around across eras is simple. They stay flexible. Sometimes they're partners, sometimes they're enemies, but they almost never overextend. Trevor can blow up a lab, your online character can rob a shipment, and instead of going full gang war, the Triads usually pivot, replace a manager, and keep the route open. The dock workers change, the nightclub branding changes, the money flow doesn't. But that kind of quiet adaptation isn't universal. While the Triads evolve from fish factories to EM blasting nightclubs, another old-school powerhouse keeps trying to play 1980s mobster in a 2013 world. Up next, the Russian mobs are going to show you exactly what happens when you don't adapt fast enough. The Russians in Liberty City are what happens when the calendar hits 2008 and the mob doesn't update its software. You go from guys in tracksuits taking orders, to guys in tracksuits writing the orders, and the old mafia barely sees it coming. Mikhail Faustin is your first real look at this new breed. He runs the Faustin family out of Hove Beach. Technically a Bratva crew, but really just whatever Mikhail feels like that day. During his missions, it's revealed that he's a paranoid coke addict who kills on impulse, blows up a rival club because he's bored, and executes people in his own bar for looking at him wrong. This would make a lot more sense in the context of a gang collapsing, but the scary part is that Faustin's crew is actually growing while he's doing all this. Behind him is Dmitry Roskolov, the calm one who smiles while he's rearranging the whole board. Dmitry starts as Faustin's right hand, plays the loyal lieutenant, then sells him out to the Italians the second it becomes profitable. He has Nico kill Faustin, then immediately betrays Nico too, handing him to Ray Bulgarin and the Albanian hitters. That pattern explains the Eastern European style in GTA IV. Everyone is temporary, every deal is disposable, and loyalty is just a coupon they redeem once. Ray Bulgarin is the shark circling all of this from overseas. He's a human trafficking and smuggling boss who used to employ Nico back in the Balkans, and it's believed that Nico losing one of his shipments is why Bulgarin fixates on him so hard. Bulgarin's operations run through cargo, migrants, drugs, and weapons, with rumors of bodies dumped in the ocean as casually as trash. When you see his men in The Lost and Damned, and The Ballad of Gay Tony, it's also revealed that he's extending feelers into Liberty City nightlife and biker territory at the same time. For Nico, these guys are employers and executioners in the same breath. Faustin hires him because he's useful. Dmitry uses him as a pawn in his deal with the Pegorinos, and Bulgarin treats him like unfinished paperwork he wants to set on fire. You get paid, you get used, and the second you become inconvenient, someone's already dialing a hit squad. If you ain't sleeping, you start to notice that almost every big Russian job ends with Nico ambushed in a warehouse, a shipyard, or a derelict building. What really pushes the balance of power is how aggressive they are compared to the aging Italian mafia. Jimmy Pegorino is begging for a seat at the Gambetti table, while Dmitry is cutting global heroin deals and partnering with Raskolov's own enemies when it suits him. The old Dons worry about bad press. The Russians worry about leaving witnesses. In reality, that wins. Even with Faustin's chaos and Dmitry's constant betrayals, the Eastern European presence only expands. Grab some snacks, because next, you're going to see how Liberty City's bikers and nightclubs get squeezed in that same vice. But before the bikers get their turn in the grinder, hit pause on the headline cruise for a second, because some of the most interesting gangs in Jita are the ones you barely notice, the ones you probably drove past on the way to a mission and never thought about again. Take the Yardies in GTA 3-3. On paper, they're just a Jamaican posse hanging around Newport, driving those bright green and yellow cars that look like rolling highlighters. In reality, they're a tiny node in a much bigger web, bouncing between the Leone family and the Colombians, running drugs and guns while trying not to get flattened by either side. The game never gives you a Yardie's origin cutscene, but their accents, their cars, and their missions quietly tell you they've been in Liberty City long before Claude shows up and starts rearranging the food chain. Vice City does the same thing with the Sharks. They're basically the other gang to the Cubans and Haitians, cruising around in those silver Sentinel Lexus cars, wearing teal, and mostly existing so you have someone to chase in side missions. But their presence suggests a whole off-screen story, a slick, more white-collar outfit muscling into Vice City's coke trade after the big refugee waves, trying to carve out a niche while the real war is happening between Diaz, the Vance brothers, and later Tommy. If you ain't sleeping, you start to notice how many of these guys are just there in the background, like a failed startup in the crime economy. Liberty City in the HD era doubles down on this. You've got random Albanian loan shark crews tailing Roman, Tiny Spanish lords clicks on a couple corners, Korean shopfront muscle, and those nameless Russian hangar guys who exist so Nico has someone to shoot during a deal gone bad. They feel disposable because the story treats them that way, but radio news blurbs and NPC chatter keep dropping lines about turf disputes, missing lieutenants, and escalating gang tensions that you never fully see. This would make a lot more sense in the context of a city where a dozen low-level gangs are fighting invisible wars under the radar of the Pegorinos and Roskolovs. A lot of these groups just quietly vanish between games. The Yardies never really resurface. The Sharks don't make the jump to HD Vice, at least not yet. It's believed that some of them got wiped out, some merged into bigger outfits, and some just aged out into irrelevance, like old brands nobody buys anymore. The graffiti that stays, or disappears, explains a lot. Tags painted over, colors fading, radio hosts talking about former gang hotspots like they're tourist attractions now. And that's the pattern interrupt here. You realize the map is crowded with ghosts. Because next we're going into Gita Online, where the minor gang is you, your friends, and whatever color your custom kuruma is. And the entire map quietly becomes your turf. And Gita Online basically asks, what happens when the ghosts step back and you move in? You spawn in a familiar Los Santos, families on the corners, Ballas in purple, Vagos in yellow, lost MC patches on rusty bikes, Madrazo's guys in SUVs. It looks like single player, just with worse driving from the people around you. But in reality, the gangs are almost set dressing at first, because the real story is you going from Simeon's errand boy to someone the Fib quietly puts on speed dial. Early on, the game still pretends the old gangs matter. Lamar calls you to jack Ballas cars. Gerald sends you into Vagos stash houses. You raid lost MC trailers out in Blaine County, cleaning up the same meth-soaked mess Trevor left behind. These contact missions feel like classic gang work. Low pay, lots of bullets, arguing in alleyways. They're framed like you're helping the families push back or hurting the Ballas, but it's believed that none of it actually shifts the map. They're just repeatable bedtime stories about a war that's already over. And that's the twist. The Ballas or Vagos in these jobs aren't final bosses. They're stepping stones. You burn their coke, steal their bikes, kidnap their lieutenants, and the real reward isn't respect on Grove Street. It's a new contact, a better gun, a slightly less terrible apartment. The gangs become XP with bandanas. Then Rockstar flips the switch with organizations and MC clubs. Suddenly, you're registering as a CEO from a high-rise office that looks like it was paid for with hedge funds, not baggies. Or you're founding your own motorcycle club in a stolen bar, patching in friends and running contracts that used to belong to the lost. The game quietly promotes you from background goon to gang boss, and the NPC gangs don't get a vote. Once bunkers, hangars, and nightclubs arrive, the scale jumps again. You're stockpiling illegal weapons for shadow clients, smuggling cargo through Fort Zancudo airspace, laundering money through a club where NPC gangsters now line up outside as customers. It's also revealed that old enemies like the Vagos or generic cartel goons mostly show up as hired muscle you mow down while protecting your business assets. This would make a lot more sense in the context of a world where crime globalizes, neighborhood sets get absorbed into supply chains, and the player is the chain. By the time you're running acid labs in drug wars, or juggling multiple heist finales, NPC gangs have fully shifted into two roles: disposable enemies in wave-based shootouts, or nameless guards you pay to protect your warehouse. The lore quietly rewires itself. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because every update from the original heist to nightclubs to drug wars keeps answering the same question: who really runs Los Santos now? And why is it almost never the people with actual gang names anymore? So Rockstar answers that question by basically saying, you do. But not as a shot caller on a block, as a project manager in a balaclava. The original Heists update is where you first feel it shift. Lester suddenly turns your apartment into a boardroom. You walk over to a whiteboard, and instead of hanging on a corner with the families or Ballas, you're assembling a four-man task force with defined roles, cuts, and contingency plans. Each heist crew is a temporary gang, but way more professional than most of Los Santos' actual sets. One person is the host, fronting the setup costs and taking the biggest cut, and the others cycle through jobs as hacker, driver, gunman. Lookout, the game literally has you argue over percentages in a menu. In reality, that's profit sharing. It's believed that this is Rockstar quietly showing you that a random player lobby can run a cleaner operation than the Vagos have managed in 20 years of hanging around alleys. After that, the CEO and VIP systems turn the joke into policy. You walk into a glass tower in Del Perro, sit down at a SecuroServe terminal and legally register as an organization. You're not a gang leader, you're a chief executive. Your friends stop being homies and become associates and bodyguards, paid on salary every few minutes while you move crates, special cargo, or laundered vehicles through warehouses the Ballas don't even know exist. It's also revealed that the city's most serious smuggling routes are now run from these sleek offices with gun lockers and whiskey bars, not from trap houses. You call in armored SUVs, buzzards, and air support like a private army because some rival CEO across the map dared to touch your shipment. Old turf wars over Grove Street get replaced by hostile takeovers of import-export businesses, all decided on a global leaderboard. Then the Bikers update shows up and throws a bone to anyone who misses patched jackets. You can finally form your own MC, echoing the Lost, but this time you're the president. You choose the clubhouse, pick the emblem, assign roles like road captain and enforcer, and decide whether your crew runs weed, meth, coke, or forgery operations. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because this is a long one in terms of menus alone. What used to be gang activity turns into management gameplay. Supply runs replace corner boy work. Sell missions replace classic hand-to-hand deals. Territory is no longer a colored blob on the map. It's which industrial unit you bought and how often you can keep it stocked without some level 12 in a jet griefing your shipment. This would make a lot more sense in the context of a satire about latest stage capitalism. And that's exactly what it is. By the time you're juggling CEO work, MC businesses, and heist replays, the families and Ballas feel like background extras in your corporate crime saga. And Rockstar isn't done. Because the moment nightclubs arrive, the game quietly asks a darker question. What happens when every gang in the city, from street sets to cartels, accidentally starts working for your nightlife brand without even realizing it? Nightclubs quietly answer that question, because when the nightclub update drops, you stop being just a CEO with a warehouse problem and start acting like a full-blown crime brand manager. You're not standing on a corner anymore. You're standing on a balcony, looking down at a packed dance floor while a safe in the basement fills with clean money you didn't even have to touch. The club is sold to you as a lifestyle accessory, but in reality, it's a laundering machine for every shady thing you've ever set up in Los Santos. Coke lockup, bunker, document forgery, all that feeds into one neon box with Tony Prince smiling at the door. It's believed that this is Rockstar's way of saying the old gang hustle is obsolete, because your street team is just a supply chain now, and you're the faceless owner who never has to get his shoes dirty. Inside, you've got VIP booths, celebrity DJs, and NPCs doing emotes like they're in a music video. And none of them know that the guy in the corner, wearing a cheap mask and a duffel bag, just came from wiping out a lost MC convoy. The Lost are still technically around as mission fodder. The Vagos still show up guarding random stashes, but they're background noise to the humming of your nightclub warehouse technicians. Then the Diamond Casino and Resort takes that same idea and wraps it in marble and gold. The casino is introduced as a legal palace of chance, but it's also revealed that its vault is basically a magnet for every serious criminal in the city. The Diamond Casino heist explains that crime in Los Santos has moved upstairs, into private penthouses, security tunnels, and boardrooms where people sign NDAs before they betray each other. You still see gangs during these updates, but mostly as hired muscle or minor obstacles. Duggan goons, random bikers, some Vagos guarding a delivery route. The real fights are between your organization, other players' crews, and faceless corporations like the Duggans or corrupt security firms. Families in Ballas aren't bidding on casino ownership. They're not buying penthouse suites with personal dealers and champagne bars. You are. Visually, the gap is brutal. Out in South Los Santos, families and Ballas are still arguing on cracked sidewalks, wearing slightly updated versions of the same colors you saw back in San Andreas. Meanwhile, you're walking through the Diamond lobby in a tailored suit and designer shoes, laundering millions through slot machines, table games, and backroom deals. And then, pattern break. Cut away from all the neon and glass. It's late at night on Grove Street. A lone Ballas member leans against a lowrider, purple rag in his pocket, scrolling his phone waiting for a call that's never coming. He doesn't know that the real war for Los Santos is happening in a soundproof VIP lounge, 3 miles away and 30 floors up, where his entire world is just a line on someone else's financial report. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because the next phase pushes gangs even further into the past. Drug Wars is kind of the moment where Rockstar stops pretending you're just another hustler. You're not on the corner with a duffel bag. You're running a full-blown psychedelic industry. In the Los Santos Drug Wars update, you set up mobile acid labs inside brigade trucks, cook product for Dax and the Fooligans, and push hallucinogens at a scale that makes the old families versus Ballas weed spots look like lemonade stands. The game quietly tells you the war moved from cul-de-sacs to supply chains. During those missions, you see it clearly. The Fooligans act like a chaotic stoner gang, but you're the one with the lab, the logistics, the upgrades. You're buying equipment, optimizing yields, and treating a drug empire like a startup. It's believed that this is Rockstar's way of saying the future of crime in Jita isn't about who owns Grove Street. It's about who owns distribution. NPC crews show up as muscle or comic relief, but the real power is the player with the spreadsheet brain and the weaponized delivery truck. The contract doubles down on that idea, but with a familiar face. Franklin Clinton was the repo kid from Forum Drive, stuck between the families and a midlife crisis bank robber. By the time you meet him in Jita Online's timeline, he's co-founder of F, Clinton and Partner, a high-end solutions agency in a glass office, taking calls from Dr. Dre. Franklin still wears green sometimes, but now it's boardroom green. He's not doing drive-bys, he's negotiating retainers. It's also revealed that Franklin's whole business model is basically gang logic with better branding. Protection, retaliation, information, all sold as a premium service to Vinewood elites. The same kid who used to argue with Lamar about which set was real is now arguing about which celebrity contract is billable hours. This would make a lot more sense in the context of his arc if you remember how disillusioned he was with the families during story mode, because in reality, he didn't outgrow crime. He just outgrew turf. These updates quietly answer what happens to gangsters who survive long enough. They level up into consultants, CEOs, and partners. Old gang tags are still on the walls, but the people who wore those colors either died, got locked up, or now run security firms and music labels. NPC gangs still exist, but they're increasingly side content. Rival dealers to clear out during a delivery, background enemies in a warehouse, or desperate clients calling you when their little street crew is in over its head. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because this is a long one. And the uncomfortable punchline is that the most successful gangsters in Jita are the ones who stop being gangs at all. If the Ballas, families, Vagos, lost MC, and everyone else ended up as either targets or customers for player-run businesses, who actually won the gang wars of Ta? And before we crown a winner, you kind of have to slow down for a second and remember what all those colors actually mean. Because every time you see a green hoodie or a purple bandana on screen, that's not just a chess piece in some big gang strategy game. That's a person who was a kid once, who had a mom, who got scared the first time shots went off for real. Rockstar loves giving you archetypes. The loyal lieutenant, the crazy enforcer, the useless cousin. But behind that, it's also revealed that almost every gang story has at least one character who's basically doomed from the start. Johnny Klebitz is the perfect example. In Liberty City, he's trying to keep the lost MC together, juggling Billy's chaos and the brokered truces, and it's believed that he really thinks loyalty can save them. By the time you meet him again in Blaine County, that same loyalty walks him straight into Trevor's boot, and a meth spiral he never climbs out of. Sweet is the San Andreas version of that same tragedy. He's so obsessed with the hood, with Grove Street's name and color and respect, that he can't see the world changing around him. CJ wants to get rich, move out, grab some snacks at the Vinewood Lifestyle Buffet, but Sweet drags him back to that cul-de-sac because he honestly believes dying on that sidewalk is more honorable than living in the hills. In reality, the game makes it funny sometimes, but the subtext is just the guy who can't imagine any identity outside of those few blocks. And then you've got the ones who don't even get names. The Ballas in the backseat during a drive-by. The Vagos who sprint out of an alley and get dropped in 2 seconds. The random families member you accidentally clip with your car during a mission. The game doesn't stop. Nobody mourns them. The radio keeps playing. But if you ain't sleeping, your brain might quietly go, yeah, that dude had a whole life before I turned the corner. Rockstar wraps all of this in jokes and exaggeration. The radio hosts clown on gang culture. NPCs argue about turf like it's fantasy football. And the missions turn shootouts into set pieces. But underneath that, the writing keeps circling the same real themes. Neighborhoods gutted by systemic poverty. People selling each other out for a tiny step up. Addiction rotting crews from the inside. And the lure of quick power that always costs more than it pays. So out of everything so far, which gang story actually felt the most unfair to you? Johnny's last ride? Sweet's tunnel vision? Or those nameless extras who only exist to catch a stray bullet so your mission can progress? This would make a lot more sense in the context of how Rockstar treats gangs across the whole series, because some groups just quietly disappear between games. No funeral, no cutscene. They're just gone. And after this little emotional pit stop, we're going right back into that mystery. How entire gangs can rise, fall, and then vanish from the map like they were never painted on the walls at all. So now you're in that weird Gita limbo where a gang can be legendary in one game and then by the next title it's like they never existed. No news story, no mural, just silence and a different set of colors on the same corners. The clearest case is the original Grove Street families from San Andreas. During CJ's story, they claw their way back from rock bottom, push the Ballas off key blocks, and reunite the hood under Sweet's old-school rules. But by the time you pull up in GTA V, that specific Grove set is gone. Grove Street itself is purple. The Ballas hang out on the cul-de-sac. And the only green you see is Franklin's crew up in Strawberry, who are technically families, but not the same Grove you remember. Vice City does the same magic trick. The Cubans under Humberto Robina and the Haitians under Auntie Poulet are central to Tommy Vercetti's rise. You run missions in Little Havana and Little Haiti. You blow up factories. You literally tip the balance of power. Then, in the HD era, when we go back to a Miami-style map and online events and references, those exact factions never formally show up again. You just get radio jokes, neighborhood names, and NPC accents that suggest they used to be around. Liberty City has its own missing ghosts. In GTA 3, you've got smaller outfits like the Uptown Yardies, the Diablos, and the Hoods in Shoreside Vale. They fight over scraps, while the Leone family pretends to run everything. By GTA 4, those crews don't reappear in any serious way. Instead, you get the Albanian loan sharks, the McRearys, the Pegorinos, the Russian mobs, and it's believed that a lot of those old 3-era gangs were either absorbed, wiped, or just aged out. In reality, you can explain a lot of it in universe. Some gangs probably got folded into bigger organizations once drugs and guns scaled up. Others were likely erased in quiet wars you never see, the kind that end with one last drive-by and a lot of empty houses. Leaders die, lieutenants retire, and the next generation decides that Instagram clout is safer than standing on a corner in matching colors. With Grove Street, fans go even harder. One theory suggests Sweet eventually turned Grove into a low-key, community-focused group that stopped banging publicly, which is why you don't see them in V, but you still hear NPCs talk about old families on Grove. Another theory is darker. The Ballas and Vagos basically formed a loose understanding, squeezed Grove Street from both sides after CJ left, and finished the job that crack and corruption started before the events of San Andreas. It's also revealed that some players think Franklin's set is the last flicker of that legacy, clinging on in a different neighborhood. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how Rockstar handles eras. The 3 era and the H era are basically soft reboots, which gives them freedom to reset the board while leaving little echoes, like the families and Ballas rivalry in V, feeling like a direct callback to Grove vs. Ballas. So the real bedtime question is this: are the families and Ballas you see rolling past Franklin's aunt's house literally descended from CJ's war? Or are they just spiritual reboots wearing the same colors? And what does that actually change for who really owns Los Santos now? Rockstar kind of answers that question, and dodges it at the same time. Officially, GTA V sits in the HD universe with IV and online, while San Andreas is locked in the old 3D universe. That split is Rockstar's way of saying, different timeline, different canon, no direct one tune. So on paper, the families you roll with as Franklin are not Grove Street Families 2.0, and CJ's exact war never technically happened in Franklin's Los Santos. But then you actually play the game, and the map starts talking to you. You spawn Franklin in Strawberry and Chamberlain Hills, surrounded by green. The families wear green bandanas, rock green cars, and hang out on front lawns that look suspiciously like updated PS2 yards. Drive down to Grove Street itself and it's all purple now, fully taken over by the Ballas, which strongly suggests a lost war already happened off-screen. It's also revealed that the Ballas in V still use crack and heroin to destabilize their rivals, just like the old San Andreas story explained the fall of Grove Street. You hear it in the dialogue too. Lamar throws around families like it's a legacy brand, talking about how they used to be something before the sets split up. OGs complain about different cliques not rolling together, and the radio hosts mention how the families are fractured and underfunded, while the Ballas and Vagos expand. This would make a lot more sense in the context of Grove Street's collapse, even if Rockstar swears it's all a clean reboot. Because fans don't buy that clean break, you get a whole cottage industry of theories. Some people say the Chamberlain gangster families are the spiritual descendants of Grove Street, with older members being kids during CJ's time. Others point at the Carson Avenue families and Davis neighborhood families and argue each set could be a splinter from that original idealized gang, watered down by years of drugs, RICO cases, and bad leadership. It's believed that the purple Grove Street in V is basically a crime scene chalk outline of San Andreas' ending. In reality, Rockstar seems to want it both ways. They keep the universes separate so they don't have to track every old mission choice, but they also paint the same corners in the same colors, drop you on Grove Street during a mission, and let you feel like you're driving through a decayed memory. It explains why the Lost MC are directly carried over from IV, while Grove Street only survives as vibes and references. So even if you ain't sleeping, the bedtime answer is this. On a legal canon level, the families are not Grove Street's children, but narratively they absolutely are. They inherit the same arc of a proud neighborhood army broken into bickering sets, squeezed by harder drugs, harder time, and harder economics. And that pattern isn't just for Los Santos. It's about to show up when you look at how every other gang in the HD era slowly eats itself alive. So once you see that Grove Street style arc repeating, you can start asking a bigger question. Who actually runs Los Santos right now? Because the guys yelling on the corner are loud, but they're not the ones signing the checks. At the bottom you've got the street level players. The families, the Ballas, the Vagos, the Aztecas, the scraps of the Lost MC still limping around after Trevor turns their Blaine County chapter into fertilizer. They control blocks, alleys, a few motels, a cul-de-sac here and there. They're visible, they're dangerous, and they'll absolutely light you up for driving through the wrong color during a mission. But their scope is tiny. They fight over who sells dime bags at the gas station while the city zoning board quietly approves another high-rise full of money launderers. Above them you start hitting the mid-ear. This is where it's believed the real logistics live. Martin Madrazo's cartel operation, the Triads running out of Little Seoul and the docks, all the nameless smuggling outfits that move cocaine, meth, weapons, and stolen cars between Blaine County airfields and the port of Los Santos. In reality, these guys don't care what color a rag is. They care about routes, containers, and who owns the warehouse next to the freeway on-ramp. When you blow up a Madrazo shipment with Trevor, you're not just annoying one guy. You're poking at a wholesale distribution network that quietly feeds half the street dealers you see. Then, at the very top, Gita Online pulls the camera back even further. Suddenly the real apex predators are player-run organizations, shell companies, and government-adjacent muscle like Merriweather, your CEO office in Mazebank, your bunker, your nightclub front. All of that is Rockstar basically saying this is who actually runs the city if you ain't sleeping. It's also revealed that Merriweather can act like a private army for hire, but they stay legit because their contracts are wrapped in paperwork and national security buzzwords. The Fib and Ya play fake turf wars on TV while quietly taking cuts from every side. Money laundering is what separates these tiers. Street gangs touch cash. Métier cartels and triads wash it through trucking companies, import-export paperwork, and real estate. The top layer doesn't even see the money. It exists as offshore accounts, life invader stock, and shell corporations that own other shell corporations. A Ballas set might own a trap house. A player CEO technically owns a media company, a cargo firm, a nightclub, and an asset management business. All of which explain why a random 20-something suddenly has a hangar full of attack helicopters. So, if you follow colors, you'll say the Ballas run Davis, the families run Strawberry, the Vagos run the canals. But if you follow the money instead of the colors, the map flips. The real bosses are the people whose names never appear on a wanted poster, only on property deeds and corporate filings. And the scary part is, the gangs on the sidewalk genuinely believe they're in charge. We're going to zoom out one more time and look at how that same pyramid shows up in Liberty City and beyond. Because Los Santos is not the only place where the loudest guys with guns are actually working for ghosts. So when you zoom that pyramid out to Liberty City, you start to see the same shape, just colder, wetter, and way more Eastern European. By the end of GTA IIV and both episodes, Liberty's gang map looks busy on the surface, but if you ain't sleeping, you can tell who's actually still standing. You've got the classic Italian mafia families first: Pegorinos, Gambettes, Ancelottes. On paper, they're the old kings. In reality, they're already past their sell-by date when Nico shows up. The Pegorinos are desperate for a commission seat, the Gambettes act like the last real mob, and the Ancelottes are half checked out, doing suburban mobster cosplay while their kids go to college. Around them you've got Russian and Eastern European outfits like Faustin's crew, Dmitry Raskolov's people, Bulgarin's shadowy operation, plus the Algonquin Triads, the Lost MC chapters, and smaller street gangs like the North Holland hustlers and Spanish lords trying to hold corners instead of boardrooms. Nico's choices don't wipe the slate clean, but they do sandblast the Italian names off the top. He kills Faustin, which lets Dmitri climb, but then Dmitri usually dies in one of the endings. Jimmy Pegorino either gets Michael and Francis McReary killed before he's hunted down, or he still ends up dead on that Alderney pier. It's also revealed that Ray Bocchino can be executed on Pegorino's orders, and Phil Bell is left paranoid and sidelined. Every time Nico pulls the trigger in a mob mission, another mid-level guy who could have stabilized things is gone. The game quietly explains that by the credits, the Pegorinos are finished, the Ancelottis are weakened, and the Gambettis are strongest, mostly because everyone else fell over. That vacuum doesn't stay empty. The Russian and Eastern European outfits are younger, meaner, and way less sentimental about tradition. Even when Dmitri and Bulgarin are dead, it's believed that their networks, their money routes, and their corrupt port contacts survive them. You see guys like the Pavanos trying to edge in, and the story suggests that the people importing guns, heroin, and trafficked bodies through Liberty's docks don't really care which Italian surname is on the contract. After the Lost MC gets shredded by internal betrayal, drug wars, and the Jim versus Billy civil war, their biker territory is basically free real estate for whoever shows up with the truck. The Triads are the opposite of all that chaos. They stay in Chinatown, stick to business, and treat Nico like a contractor, not a brother. They take losses, but they don't implode. Because they're focused on money and community fronts, it's believed they quietly expand while everyone else is busy dying in parking lots. The small street gangs keep fighting, but by the end they feel like noisy subcontractors for bigger, quieter organizations. So who wins Liberty City? Probably the faceless Eastern European logistics guys and the Triads accountants. But this would make a lot more sense in the context of one question. Does any GTA city ever actually stabilize? Or is every so-called winner just waiting for the next protagonist-shaped meteor to hit and reset the whole food chain again? Grab some snacks, because the pattern that starts in Liberty doesn't stop there. And once you leave Liberty's mess behind, you hit the weirdest case study of all. Vice City. The place where the game actually lets one guy win. At the end of GTA, Vice City, Tommy Vercetti isn't just some mid-tier hitter. He's basically the Scarface that didn't die in the last reel. By the final mission, Tommy controls the Malibu, the print works, the film studio, the car dealership, the pole position, the docks, and he's got a private army in Hawaiian shirts. Sonny's dead, Ricardo Diaz is dead, Lance is dead, and the cops are mostly just background noise. On paper, this explains why for a split second, Vice City feels like the only GTA town that actually gets stabilized. You've got one kingpin, vertical integration, and no obvious rival left standing. But if you ain't sleeping, you know GTA never leaves a vacuum that clean. The second the credits roll, the clock starts ticking on Tommy. It's believed that a guy who comes up through the Forelli family, kills his boss, and seizes a whole city is not going to retire quietly to talk shows and charity golf. Internal betrayal is basically baked into his origin story. He only wins because Lance turns on Sonny, and then Tommy turns on Lance. That pattern doesn't stop just because he's wearing a nicer suit. In reality, you can see at least 4 futures. 1. His own guys sell him out when the money or paranoia gets bad enough. 2. Law enforcement finally wakes up and does the RICO, but with palm tree sting, using his businesses against him the same way Michael's deal with Dave Norton flips North Yankton. 3. Some outside cartel decides that a coked-up ex-con from Liberty shouldn't be the customs officer for half of Latin America's product and quietly moves in from the dockside. Or 4. He just ages out, turns into a bitter, half-legend like the old mafia bosses you hear about in G-Tive, sitting in a mansion while younger crews carve up what used to be his. The smaller gangs he stepped on don't get a happy epilogue either. The Cubans and Haitians spend most of Vice City tearing each other apart, then getting farmed for missions by Tommy. By the end, their leaders are weakened, their street wars are bad for business, and Tommy's empire is the only thing that really scales. It's also revealed that this kind of consolidation usually means one of 2 things. They either shrink into neighborhood crews with more history than power, or they get absorbed as cheap muscle into whoever runs the ports. And this is where Rockstar does something kind of cruel. They just stop. They never revisit 3D era Vice City in the HD timeline. No Gita IV news report about Vercetti, no Gita V radio host talking about a fallen kingpin in Florida, nothing. The entire fate of that empire is one of the biggest blank spaces in the series. That silence keeps the curiosity alive. If Rockstar ever brings back an HD Vice City, the real hook won't just be new graphics. It'll be walking those streets and seeing which ghosts actually left scars on the map. Did you inherit Tommy's empire? Or are you just picking through the ruins of a guy the world forgot about the second the neon lights turned off? And the wild part is, you don't actually need a cutscene to answer any of that. Rockstar just lets the map talk. If you ain't sleeping, this is where you start reading the city like a crime scene that never got cleaned up. San Andreas is the loudest example. The turf war system turns Los Santos into a strategy game you play by accident. When you roll up on a Ballas block in early game, it's purple jerseys, purple lowriders, and NPCs that feel way too confident standing on corners. After you start taking territories back for Grove Street, the whole ecosystem flips. Green homies spawn instead of Ballas. Gang cars swap from purple sedans to green Savannas and Tahomas. And drive-bys start targeting you. Because the game now recognizes you as a threat, not just a stray CJ jogging through. It also quietly tracks who's fading. Grove Street at the start is canonically washed. You walk through your own cul-de-sac, and it feels empty, with just a couple of guys half committed to the cause. Compare that to rolling into a Ballas neighborhood where 3 cars deep will spawn if you just breathe wrong. That imbalance explains the story without a speech. Your gang already lost the war before you even picked up the controller. Graffiti tags are the visual subtitles. In Los Santos, walls are layered with Grove green and Ballas purple, and the ratio on each block tells you who's been winning. When you spray over enemy tags in those side missions, you're not just ticking a collectible. The game is literally repainting the narrative of the street. It's believed that some areas feel safer after you clean them up, because the enemy presence drops, and Grove NPC density goes up, so the color on the wall becomes a forecast for who you're going to see standing under it. In the HD games, Rockstar dials down the UI and cranks up the ambience. GTA 4 doesn't flash a turf map at you, but if you hang around Actor or Alderney, Lost MC bikers cluster outside specific bars and industrial lots. After certain story beats, especially once the club war kicks off, and Johnny's life starts circling the drain, those same hangouts feel thinner, the bikes fewer, the conversations more bitter. The decline is revealed in who isn't showing up anymore. G to V does it with density and background noise. Before Trevor's rampage, Lost MC camps in Blaine County are packed, with bikes, meth fumes, and guys yelling about loyalty. After he blows through them, you still see the colors, but it's stray survivors, not a functioning gang. In Los Santos, Vagos activity clogs specific alleys and backlots in South LS, you'll hear Spanish trash talk, see yellow bandanas, random drug deals. Meanwhile, Grove Street is a weird echo of San Andreas. A couple of families members posted up, Ballas cruising through like they own it, and long stretches of silence that suggest the real war ended years ago. Next time, try this pattern interrupt. Drive those same streets slowly, at night, radio low, and don't start any fights. Just watch who's still out, who's patrolling in numbers, and which corners are suddenly, disturbingly empty. The map will tell you exactly which gangs are alive and which ones are already ghosts, but the silence is only half the story. The other half is what people still brave enough to stand on those corners are actually saying when you slow down and listen. In San Andreas, Grove Street doesn't just look washed, they talk like it. Before CJ really gets things moving again, you'll hear homies say stuff like, Grove Street was king, fool, or complain that things ain't like they used to be. That kind of dialogue quietly explains that the golden era already happened off screen, during the early 90s, before the crack, the betrayals, and the green saber. It's believed that Rockstar uses those throwaway lines to tell you the real war was lost years before you booted up the game, because the gang itself is stuck telling stories about when they mattered instead of making new ones. Contrast that with the Ballas and the Vagos. Their NPCs are loud, cocky, and way more future tense. Ballas will yell, Grove Street families, ha, y'all finished, or brag about having the streets on lock. Vagos members talk about moving weight and plugging in with the essays, which suggests active alliances and a working supply chain. In reality, their trash talk functions as a status report. Ballas sound like winners who know their rivals are clinging to nostalgia, while Vagos talk like middlemen who finally got invited to the grown-ups table. By GTA War 4, you get a different kind of honesty from the Lost MC. Hang around their clubhouses and safe houses, and you'll hear bikers arguing about whether they're in it for brotherhood or for the money. Guys complain that Billy's deals with the Angels of Death and the heroin trade are bad business, or that this ain't what the Lost used to be about. It's also revealed that some members straight up question if Billy cares about the patch at all. That background chatter foreshadows exactly what happens. Betrayal from inside, pressure from rival gangs, and the slow realization that loyalty doesn't mean much when the leadership is cashing out. When you get to GTA V, the ambience turns into a financial report. Families members on the sidewalk complain about being broke, about not having no real connect, or about Ballas getting all the paper. That dialogue quietly puts them at the bottom of the modern hierarchy. At the same time, Vagos in the canals and the scrapyards brag about incoming drug shipments, cartel ties, and keeping the coke flowing, which explains why Trevor, Michael, and Franklin keep tripping over their operations during heists and side missions. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because this is a long one, and this would make a lot more sense in the context of how Rockstar writes gangs. The NPCs are basically doing commentary tracks on their own rise and fall. If you listen closely, they'll tell you who's on the way up, who's barely hanging on, and who's already halfway in the grave long before the story ever spells it out. Once you start listening to NPCs like that, you notice a pattern. Every time a playable protagonist walks into town, it's like a meteor hitting a dinosaur park. The gangs are already mid-argument about rent and cocaine, and then this guy falls out of the sky with plot armor and a gun collection. That's the meteor metaphor. CJ, Nico, Tommy, Michael, Franklin, Trevor, they don't slowly climb the ladder, they crash straight through the roof. The city already has a balance when the game begins. In reality, the Ballas, Vagos, Mafias, Lost MC, cartels, they've all carved out fragile truces. Then you show up, and the script quietly says, what if we accelerated every grudge by 10 years? CJ is the cleanest example. When you meet him in San Andreas, Grove Street is washed. Drugs, betrayal, and bad leadership already pushed them off the map before the story even starts. His return gives them a temporary second wind. You start taking back territories, greening up the map. It's believed that families are finally back. But that same comeback run also exposes Ryder and Big Smoke as traitors, pulls Tenpenny's corruption into the open, and drags Grove into wars they can't survive without CJ babysitting them. After the credits, you know the meteor is leaving. The question is whether anything he rebuilt can actually stand without him. Nico in Liberty City works like a freelance extinction event. He doesn't belong to any one family, so he becomes the guy every crumbling outfit hires when they want a shortcut. He works for Faustin, then Dimitri, then Pegorinos, Irish, Russians, Albanians. Each job he takes out a captain here, a don there, and suddenly the enchiladas and gambetes feel a lot thinner at the top. It's also revealed that some of the biggest shifts, like who runs the Pegorino family, or which Irish brother lives long enough to plan another score, are decided because Nico needed money that day. He's not trying to rewrite Liberty City's gang map, but the body count explains why the old mafia is basically on life support by the end. Then in GTA V you get greedy. Rockstar drops a whole meteor shower. Michael, Franklin, and Trevor don't just nudge gangs, they erase and rewrite them. Trevor wipes out the Lost MC chapter in Blaine County during a single drug-fueled tantrum, turning a multi-game biker presence into a roadside rumor. Michael and Franklin helped destabilize Martin Madrazo's cartel operations, just because Michael wanted to feel like a movie character again. The fib heists, the Union Depository hit, all of that drags the families, Ballas, Merriweather, and every mid-level plug into a storm they didn't plan for. If you ain't sleeping, you can see that by the final mission, half the city's criminal ecosystem has either been humiliated, robbed, or buried in the desert. But here's the part the games barely talk about. After each meteor leaves, the crater is still there. 10 years later, who quietly moves into Lost MC's old meth routes? Which Ballas sets decide Grove Street was just a phase and repaint the cul-de-sac? Who's telling bedtime stories about that one summer when some guy named Nico killed everybody important? And who's already rewriting the legend to make themselves the hero? Grab some snacks, because this is a long one, and the next part is about what grows back in those craters. What grows back in those craters usually isn't smarter, it's just more scared. And that's the real pattern with Gita gangs. You're not just looking at colors and cars. You're looking at piles of trauma trying to organize. CJ is a good example. By the time you see him in San Andreas, he's already run from Los Santos because of his brother's death, and his mom gets killed right as he comes home. That kind of loss explains why he clings so hard to Grove Street, even when it's revealed that the gang is already rotting from the inside. He isn't just fighting Ballas and crack. He's fighting the idea that the last thing tying his family together might be a lie. Johnny Klebitz in The Lost and Damned is similar in a darker way. Johnny's a veteran. It's believed he saw real combat before he ever rode a Harley. And that war mindset never really turns off. Loyalty and brotherhood become his replacement for a normal life. So he keeps covering for Billy Gray even when Billy is obviously dragging the club into suicidal beefs. In reality, Johnny doesn't need a president, he needs a therapist, but instead he gets a guy who sells him out to the angels of death. Nico Bellic might be the clearest case. He walks into Liberty City with a smile that never reaches his eyes because his whole childhood was war, betrayal, and a massacre he still doesn't fully understand. He latches onto Roman, onto the dream of a better life, and then onto people like Dimitri because he's desperate for someone who isn't lying this time. That's exactly why Dimitri's betrayal hits so hard. It's not just a business move. It's the universe confirming Nico's worst fear that everyone eventually turns on you. Loyalty in these stories is a double-edged weapon. It's what keeps CJ riding for Sweet even when Sweet keeps making dumb, pride-driven calls. It's what keeps Johnny backing Billy until the cage fight set up. It's what keeps Nico doing jobs for Roman's sake, long after he realizes Liberty City is just another battlefield. The same glue that holds these crews together also keeps them stuck to leaders who are addicted, paranoid, or already planning their exit. And when that glue snaps, everything falls fast. Big Smoke and Ryder flipping to the Ballas doesn't just hurt CJ emotionally. It hands over blocks, cops, and supply lines. Dimitri turning on Nico reshapes the entire power map of Broker and Bohan. Billy Gray sabotaging the Lost doesn't just get a few bikers killed, it decapitates the whole chapter so hard that by Gita V, Trevor can wipe out their Blaine County leadership in one afternoon and nobody rides in to save them. One betrayal at the top becomes funerals, RICO cases, and empty cul-de-sacs with old tags fading in the sun. If you ain't sleeping yet, this would make a lot more sense in the context of remembering that every gang in Gita is just wounded people making bad choices together, over and over. And once you see that, you can start to see the next question, when the old loyalties burn out. Who steps in to sell these people a new kind of belonging? And that new belonging is where you really feel the jump from old Gita to HD Gita. If you grew up on the PS2 games, your brain still sees gangs as color-coded action figures. In Gita 3, Vice City, San Andreas, every crew is basically a walking mini-map icon. The cartel in turquoise jackets, the Leone guys in suits, the Versetti gang in pastel shirts, Grove Street in green, Ballas in purple, Vagos in yellow. You can spot them from a block away, and the game wants you to. It's exaggerated on purpose, like you're flipping through a violent Saturday morning cartoon. Those old Dara gangs talk loud, dress louder, and almost feel like theme park versions of real groups. You've got the Sharks and Bikers in Vice City with their neon bikes and leather, or the Triads in Chinatown with swords and exploding fish factories. Even when the story gets dark, the tone still treats gang wars as missions and minigames. Defend this hood, spray this tag, blow up those cars. The humor is right on the surface, and the archetypes are simple. These guys are the enemy. These guys are your family. Pick a color and start shooting. When Rockstar moves into the HD era with IV and V, that cartoon palette gets washed out. Liberty City's gangs in IV feel tired, broke, and paranoid. The Russian mob, the Irish, the Pegorinos, and Enchiladas are all scrambling for scraps because the golden age already passed. It's also revealed that half the time you're not joining a glorious rise, you're just watching the last chapter of a long, slow decline. In reality, most of the big men you meet are terrified of being obsolete. Los Santos in IV keeps that. The families in Ballas still echo Grove Street versus Ballas, but it's believed that they're not literally the same organizations, just spiritual successors. The colors are there, but faded. And the joke is that the real money is moving through Devin Weston, the Fib, Madrazo, and Tech Bros, while Franklin's friends argue over who controls a single block. Gang life is shot like a low-budget documentary instead of an arcade game, and a lot of NPCs look more strung out than powerful. This shift mirrors what happened in crime media outside Gita. Early 2000s games leaned on Scarface fantasy. By the HD era, you've got The Wire, Breaking Bad, and non-stop conversations about mass incarceration, the drug war, and systemic poverty. Rockstar starts writing gangs less like cool factions and more like people trapped in a rigged economy where every upgrade just feeds a bigger machine. GTA Online sits right in the middle. Your character lives the cartoon, flying bikes, neon suits, underground bases. But walk through Chamberlain Hills or Rancho and the NPC gangs are still stuck in that bleak, grounded world, getting pushed out by your bunkers and nightclubs. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because this is a long one. Rockstar is quietly teaching you that the new gang boss is the player, and everyone else's background. And that mix of nostalgia colors with H-Dera realism kind of hints at the next step. The real question is, in the next GTA, do gangs stay as street crews, or do they finally become full-blown corporations wearing hood passes like brand logos? So once you've seen how gangs rise, you kind of have to ask the quieter question, whose fall actually hurts the most? Not in a stats way, but in that weird moment when you're driving at night in free roam, and it hits you that this whole crew you grew up with in older games is basically gone now. Grove Street families are the obvious first pick. In San Andreas, they start as a legendary hood empire, the green you're literally fighting to put back on the map. It's revealed that before the game even begins, they already fell off because of drugs, internal beef, and Big Smoke and Ryder selling them out to the Ballas and Crash. You spend a whole story arc clawing them back, block by block, like you're undoing this betrayal with every drive-by. And then GTA V pulls the rug, you go back to Grove Street, and it's purple. Ballas territory. The old cul-de-sac is just another backdrop for Franklin's early missions. Carl's whole war, his brother's trauma, all of that history wiped out by the time HD Los Santos shows up. In reality, that's Rockstar looking you in the eye and saying, yeah, you won, and time still erased you. Then you have the Lost MC, who go out much faster, but just as sad. In IV and Lost and Damned, they're a messy but real brotherhood, constantly arguing about Billy's leadership, meth, and whether they're an outlaw club or a full-in drug cartel. That internal split explains why they're already fragile when Trevor shows up in V. It's believed that by the time you hit that intro mission, years of bad calls and addiction have hollowed them out, so one chaotic night is enough to finish the job. Trevor kidnaps Ashley, kills Johnny in the dirt, and then just steamrolls the whole Blaine County charter. You watch this entire biker saga collapse into one dude's bad evening. If you ain't sleeping, it's also revealed that almost no one in-game even cares. The radio barely shrugs. The Italian mafia is a different kind of tragedy. In GTA IV, they're still powerful, but you can feel they're past their prime. The Pegorinos, Gambettes, Enchiladas, all bickering over shrinking scraps in Liberty City, while new crews like the Russians, Albanians, and Irish are hungrier. Old bosses are stuck in diners and country clubs talking about the good days, while Nico and other immigrants are doing the real dirty work. This would make a lot more sense in the context of American crime history, because Rockstar is basically showing you organized crime aging out of relevance in real time. And then there are the small tragedies you barely think about. Vice City's Cubans, Haitians, the Diaz gang. All these ethnic crews Tommy Vercetti plays against each other, uses for missions, then discards once he takes over. By later games, they're not even callbacks, just ghosts. So quietly, in your own head, which fall hits you hardest? As we keep going, try to notice which gangs you miss and which ones you never even thought about until now. So if those ghosts are still rattling around in your head, grab some snacks. Because this is a long one in Rockstar's mind too. They love time. Skipping it, rewriting it, acting like 10 years passed in the loading screen while you were just checking your phone. Imagine they finally go back to a reimagined Vice City. Neon, humidity, influencer billboards, and buried under all of that, the cracked bones of the Vercetti gang. Tommy's empire is gone, but you still see faded V logos on a warehouse door, or an old guy at the bar who used to run things. It's believed that a few ex-Verchetti lieutenants would still be around as mid-level bosses, trying to hold territory against new South American cartels and glossy corporate criminals laundering money through crypto casinos. The Cubans and Haitians, who were treated as disposable muscle in the old game, could come back as fractured, bitter factions, arguing over whether to cling to street pride or sell out and go legit. You'd get these three-way wars, where a Cuban set is doing old-school boat drops, a Haitian crew is running migrant smuggling with burner phones and drones, and some faceless security company is quietly buying up the whole shoreline. In reality, Rockstar loves that kind of triangle. One gang stuck in the past, one adapting, one pretending it's not a gang at all. Then jump to an older Los Santos. Not GTA V's Instagram age, but 10 or 15 years after. The families and the Ballas are still around, but most of the names you know are OGs sitting on porches, watching kids beef over TikTok lives and hacked iFruit accounts instead of just cul-de-sacs. Franklin's era explained how the old Grove Street myth got watered down into something smaller. A sequel could flip it again. You might have a Ballas veteran trying to keep his nephew out of the life, while that same nephew is live streaming drive-bys for clout. It's also revealed that a lot of the Colors War is now about who controls scam apps, fraud rings, and music promotion, not just corners. Liberty City could do the same thing but colder. A sequel set after GTA IV, where the kids of Nico's era gangsters are dealing with the city that's been gentrified and covered in cameras. The Albanian guys from Hove Beach? Their sons are doing security at nightclubs they used to extort. The Pegorino-style mob kids are stuck in half-empty McMansions outside the city, watching their dad's rackets get replaced by data leaks and influencer blackmail. You'd still hear stories about the old Russian, the guy who survived everything. But you'd be stuck in a world where the real threat is an algorithm. Time jumps let Rockstar quietly answer every what happened to that gang. The Lost MC, the Triads, the old mafias, you'd see which ones adapted into corporations and which ones fossilized into legends people argue about on in-game forums. And if you ain't sleeping yet, think about this. In online, you're already the cartel, the biker boss, the CEO. So any NPC gang that comes back now isn't just challenging old lore. They'd have to come for your throne. And Rockstar might finally write a gang that treats the player like the final boss. So while you're sitting on that throne, this is also the part where you're kind of allowed to slide off it a little. These gang stories sound wild on paper, but told in a calm, steady way, they start to feel less like mission briefings and more like urban legends somebody's whispering from the passenger seat while you cruise around at night. You're hearing about the families, the Ballas, the Vagos, the Lost MC, but the tone turns them into myths. The Lost aren't just bikers Trevor wipes out during that intro mission. They become the doomed riders who pushed too far into Blaine County and rode straight into their own ghost story. The Ballas stop being just purple dots on your minimap and start feeling like the shadow gang that always shows up one block too late, like they're cursed to be 5 minutes behind history. Part of why this works as bedtime lore is the rhythm. Every crew has the same basic heartbeat, rise, peak, fall. Grove Street in San Andreas is already washed when you show up, then you help them climb, then they splinter again. The Pegorino-style mafia in Liberty City is already past its prime in GTA IV, still pretending it's on the rise while the fall is baked in from the start. Because that pattern keeps repeating, your brain can drift in and out without losing the big picture. If you miss a name, it's fine. You don't need to remember which O'Neill brother got shot first, or exactly when Johnny Klebitz crosses paths with Trevor. The point is that familiar loop. Somebody grabs a corner, somebody overreaches, somebody ends up as a memorial on a forum post. You can let the details just wash over you like radio static, while the structure quietly explains itself, and the maps help with that. Revisiting Los Santos, Liberty City, Vice City in your head is weirdly comforting. You know that alley behind Grove Street, the gas station where Trevor first hits the Lost, the overpass where the Vagos like to hang out. Walking those routes in your imagination before sleep turns the chaos into something mapped and safe, like you're doing one last lap in free roam before logging off. Pattern interrupt for you. If you ain't sleeping, you might notice this is basically guided meditation. It's just about people getting shot over cul-de-sacs instead of breathing exercises. In reality, your brain treats it the same way. Repeated colors, repeated streets, repeated betrayals. It's believed that this kind of repetition is exactly what makes background noise so easy to fall asleep to. So yeah, this is a long one, and that's on purpose. You're allowed to be half awake. You're allowed to miss half a gang war. The stories will keep moving in the background. The gangs will keep rising and collapsing whether you're listening or not. And if you do drift off, when you wake up you'll still be somewhere in Los Santos, with another crew about to make the same mistakes in a different color. And while those loud gangs are burning out on your screen, something else is happening just off camera. If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because this is a long one about the people who survive by basically refusing to be interesting. In Liberty City in GTA IV, you have all these tiny neighborhood crews that never get title cards, never get dramatic cutscenes, but they're always just there. The random Jamaican guys arguing on a corner in Dukes, the Albanian lookouts Nico shakes down early on who still seem to be around later, the nameless Spanish Lord-style dealers in Bohan stairwells who don't start wars, they just keep the block supplied. The game never announces, this is a gang, but the way they move in groups, the shared colors, the repeated voice lines, all of that quietly suggests a structure that outlives whatever story you're playing. Los Santos in V does the same thing. While Franklin is bouncing between the families and crazy heists with Michael and Trevor, you've got these tiny sets in Rancho, Chamberlain Hills, even up in Mirror Park that act like microgangs. A little weed spot behind a barber shop, 3 guys always posted outside the same liquor store. A crew of bikers who never wear Lost MC cuts but clearly run that one dirt lot. They never become main antagonists, because they never do the one fatal thing every big Gita gang does. They never attract the protagonist's attention. In reality, that might be the best survival strategy in the entire series. The second you get a logo, a named leader, and a theme color that shows up on the minimap, you're already on the path to getting wiped. Grove Street families come roaring back in San Andreas, get their green everywhere, and by the time V rolls around, that specific version of Grove Street is basically a memory. The Lost MC build this cross-state biker brotherhood, get a whole DLC in IV, and then one bad night with Trevor Phillips in Blaine County just erases half their leadership on screen. Meanwhile, it's believed that the smartest people in the Triads aren't the bosses we meet, but the little subgroups we barely notice. A side room in a Chinatown restaurant that always has 2 guards and 1 unmarked van. A quiet mahjong spot in Algonquin. Some low-key crew in Textile City that never escalates beyond baseball bats. They adapt fast, change cars, change stash houses, and refuse to die for territory that looks good on a map, but gets you noticed by guys like you. This would make a lot more sense in the context of actually living there. Do you really want to be Ballas family's mafia with helicopters and fibrates? Or do you want to be the nameless Chamberlain crew that just keeps paying rent? If you ever woke up inside Los Santos or Liberty City, you probably wouldn't be chasing colors at all. You'd want to be in one of those quiet little gangs you never remember. The ones that are still going when the credits roll. And that quiet little gang that survives the credits? In Los Santos, that's usually the one with a pension plan and a badge. While you're watching Ballas and families blast each other for one street, The real long-term crew is pulling up in a black and white, writing the report, and deciding who actually gets to keep selling on that corner. Cr.sh. In San Andreas is the clearest version of this. It's introduced as an anti-gang task force, but in reality it functions like its own set. Tenpenny, Pulaski, and Hernandez roll around like shot callers, not cops. They extort CJ's family, threaten Sweet's life, and frame people because it keeps Grove Street weak and controllable. It's also revealed that Tenpenny straight up executes officers and witnesses who get in his way, then dumps the blame on whatever gang is most convenient that week. The way they move explains a lot of the chaos you see in Los Santos during that game. See R.ASH props the Ballas up with protection and information, lets crack flood the hood, and then uses the drug war as justification for more raids, more funding, and more power. They don't stop the gangs, they manage them, the same way a cartel manages its distributors. If you ain't sleeping, you start to realize that Grove Street's fall isn't just about drugs and betrayal. It's believed that CRAH quietly curated that downfall from the shadows. Jump to Gata V, and the uniforms change, but the pattern doesn't. The Fib and Merriweather are basically high-budget versions of the same idea. Steve Haynes is technically a federal agent, but he acts like a gang boss with a TV show. He sends Michael, Franklin, and Trevor on kidnappings, bombings, and assassinations, then hides it all behind classified files and redacted memos. Because it's on government paper, it's legal, even when he's torturing people on camera. Merriweather is a private army pretending to be security. They run guns, guard freighters full of mystery cargo, and show up with attack choppers anytime someone touches their client's money. They have deniability instead of colors, contracts instead of turf. One mission has you stealing from them on behalf of the Fib, while the EII is trying to expose the Fib and the LSPD is just trying not to get in the way. That mess suggests that the street sets are basically background noise compared to the agency wars. These invisible gangs constantly play the visible ones against each other. Fib leaks intel so one cartel wipes out another, then calls it a successful operation. C. R.H. Lets the Ballas expand, then cracks down on Vagos to balance the stats. Merriweather guards the rich from the chaos that their own investments helped create. This would make a lot more sense in the context of a turf map drawn by accountants instead of OGs. So when you look at who survives every game, who still has funding after every shootout, you start to wonder, if we actually mapped influence, would the biggest gang in Jita be any cartel or mafia? Or would it be the guys writing the budgets and signing the Black Ops checks? Grab some snacks. Because the next crew we're looking at might quietly answer that. And the city doesn't just answer that with guns and budgets. It answers it with ratings. In Gita, every gang war is also a content farm. You've got Weasel News helicopters circling a drive-by like it's a movie premiere, talk radio host, turning real dead families and Ballas members into punchlines, and shock jocks arguing about urban decay between ads for guns and fast food. In reality, the same ambush that wipes out half a lost MC chapter in Blaine County is the thing that boosts some anchor's career. Because carnage plays better than context. If you ain't sleeping, you start to notice how the radio quietly rewrites history. A Vinewood host will talk about Grove Street like it's this exotic war zone, but never mention why the families fell off in San Andreas, or how drugs and internal betrayal hollowed them out before you even spawned in. Talk shows in Liberty City do the same with the Leone Crime Family, treating them like a punchline about old Italians losing their touch, while ignoring the decades where they actually ran things. Outside the speakers, the walls are doing their own commentary. Graffiti and murals in Los Santos act like a street-level archive. You see half-faded green tags for sets that don't exist anymore, Ballas pieces painted over with purple, memorials for dead homies you never met. That RIP wall under the bridge, the Lost MC logo rusting on a trailer after Trevor's rampage, the ghostly GIF crowns in the cul-de-sacs Franklin drives through. All of it explains that the map remembers even when the mission list moves on. It's believed that some of those tags are intentionally left in awkward places, just to make you ask what used to be here before the yoga mats and solar panels showed up. This would make a lot more sense in the context of Rockstar treating the environment like a crime scene photo. Nothing is labeled, but everything's a clue. Then you've got the myths you bring yourself. Players talk about that time on Grove Street like a real memory. The first time you survived the 4-star Ballas ambush. The first time Trevor hit the Lost at the trailer park. The time you accidentally sideswiped a Triad convoy in GTA IV and turned Broker into a war zone. Those stories get passed around more than any in-game news report, and after a while, your scuffed getaway becomes canon in your head. Rockstar leans into this hard. They keep reusing colors, street names, and archetypes so each new game feels haunted. Green versus purple in V echoing San Andreas. Yellow Vagos standing in for every Latino set you've ever fought. Biker clubs that all feel like cousins of the Lost. Even when the devs say, canonically these aren't the exact same gangs, the visual language suggests a cycle you've been stuck in since the PS2 days. And the soft punchline is that a gang never really dies here. Maybe the families lose their last block. Maybe the Lost MC gets wiped off the Blaine County map, but the second you boot up an old save and cruise through their turf, they're back. The radio still talks about them, the tags still glow under the streetlights, and your muscle memory still knows where to duck. Which also means the next time we talk about a dead gang, you should probably ask, dead for who? The city? The lore? Or just until you load in again? So when we talk about dead gangs, that's all still kind of funny because your game doesn't care. Your Los Santos has one gang that never despawns, you. Your CEO office light is always on. Your MC clubhouse still smells like cheap beer and burnt tires. And your character just keeps waking up like the world didn't already end 3 heists ago. Think about your own GTA Online character for a second. The first rusty garage you bought out in Pillbox. That one coke lockup you swore you'd upgrade, but it's still running with the free equipment because you spent the money on chrome rims. The nightclub that prints passive income while you're AFK. And the bunker that only exists so you can drive weaponized golf carts out of it. In reality, that's your version of Grove Street. Your version of Madrazo's ranch. Just with more oppressor griefing. Rockstar never comes out and says it, but everything about online suggests your organization is canon to your own timeline, your crew tag on the wall, the contacts in your phone, the rival CEO you've been in a silent cold war with since 2016 because they blew up one sale. If you ain't sleeping, and you've been grinding since the early days, your empire has probably outlived half the named gangs we've talked about. In a meta sense, these player-run groups are just as baked into the city's ecosystem as the families or Vagos. The green and purple alien wars, the rooftop sniper duels over La Puerta, the cargo lobby where 4 different MCs circle each other and pretend they're just doing headhunters, while everyone's clearly waiting to see who blinks first. It's believed that if you mapped every player crew's turf, Los Santos would look way messier than any official territory map. If Rockstar ever decided to canonize online as a story, your organization would need a label. Some of you are basically running cartels, moving coke, meth, and guns out of the desert while wearing body armor that costs more than Franklin's entire wardrobe. Some of you are flashy Vinewood nightlife barons, living inside your nightclub office and treating every raid like unpaid club promotion. And some of you are ghosts, high-level players nobody ever sees, who only appear in kill feeds and urban legends about the guy that shot down a Hydra with a pistol. Every chaotic public lobby session is its own live-action gang war that will never be written down, but it still rewires how people remember the city. The bridge where you always get spawn killed, the alley you used to lose jets, the warehouse you associate with that one, failed sale at 3 in the morning. This would make a lot more sense in the context of an official history, but right now it just lives in group chats and half-asleep Discord calls. Pattern interrupt for you while you're listening to this. Somewhere a brand new player is walking out of the tutorial apartment, looking at a stolen car, and quietly starting their own rise and fall arc with no idea who you are. And that's kind of where we've been this whole time, watching people start that arc, write it up, and then quietly vanish off the map while you drive past the same street corner. You've basically taken a slow flight over the whole series, from Liberty City's old school muscle to Los Santos boardrooms, where the dress code is hostile takeover. Back in Liberty City, it started with the guys who thought they'd never move, the Italian mafia in 3 and 4, sitting in dark restaurants, acting like the city was a family heirloom. It's believed that the gambetes and enchiladas are still powerful, but every mission with Nico kind of explains that they're past their prime, bleeding money and respect, while younger outfits chip away at them during side jobs you barely remember. Even the bikers, like the Lost MC and IV, look tough on the surface, but you can already see the cracks when Johnny's trying to keep everybody together. Then you drifted south into Vice City, where the neon made everything look permanent. Tommy Vercetti was just a guy doing a drug deal gone wrong before he decided to rewrite the whole city. You watched him push out Diaz, take over the mansion, and build a little empire on the beach, and for a second it's revealed that he really does own the night. But in reality, the series just moves on. By the HD era, he's a ghost, and those streets get repopulated with new logos, new cartels, new guys who think they're the first ones to ever do this. San Andreas gave you the hood legends. Grove Street families trying to claw their way back after drugs, betrayal, and their own people selling them out. You see that comeback attempt. Green back on the cul-de-sac, Ballas pushed off key blocks, CJ driving around like the city finally remembers who he is. But we talked about how that doesn't last. By Yita V, Grove is erased. The cul-de-sac is just another photo spot, and the Ballas and families you see are spiritual successors at best, arguing over territory their grandparents already died for. The Lost MC's rise is the same shape, just louder. In IV and the Lost and Damned, they expand, pull in allies, try to play big boy politics with the Angels of Death and various mafias. Then Trevor walks out of a trailer in V and, during one mission, decapitates the entire Blaine County chapter. One bad meeting, one meth-fueled rampage, and a whole gang arc gets reduced to a burnt-out trailer park you speed past on the highway. By the time you hit GTA Online, the gang start wearing suits. Your rise is spreadsheets and gun running, buying offices and bunkers instead of corner stores. It's also revealed that you can own half the state on paper, but the pattern doesn't change. Updates shift, new businesses drop, and the meta quietly buries whatever empire you built 2 summers ago. Old biker crews fade, import-export kings log off, and some new level 12 CEO is already starting the same climb. If you ain't sleeping yet, you might have noticed the loop. Every gang gets a moment where they feel untouchable. Then the map changes, the story moves on, and the camera just stops visiting their block. Some are massacred, like the Lost, some just sag into the background. Like the Liberty City Mafia, some are rewritten between eras, like half the minor gangs that only exist in one game's loading screens. This would make a lot more sense in the context of an official timeline, but Gita treats them more like campfire stories, told big and loud, then abandoned for the next one. And even with all of that, we've only really hit the big names. There are still tiny cliques in alleyways, forgotten hood crews, half-mentioned cartels on radio news segments that we didn't even have time to touch. If you keep listening, we can zoom back in and let some of those smaller ghosts have the spotlight for a minute before you finally crash out. But when you zoom all the way out, past the tiny ghosts and the alleyway cliques, you hit the big question people always ask with Gita. Who actually runs any of this? If you ain't sleeping, grab some snacks, because this is a long one in the sense that the answer stretches across every game. The pattern Rockstar builds is pretty blunt. No gang holds a city forever. Power is a relay race, and the baton just keeps getting dropped, stolen, or shot out of somebody's hand. In Liberty City, you watch the Italian mafia go from boogeymen in GTA 3 to tired, shrinking outfits in GTA IV. The Pegorinos are desperate. The Gambettis are old money trying to act scary. And it's believed that half their real power already moved into boardrooms and law firms. In San Andreas, Grove Street starts as this fallen legend, then claws back territory from the Ballas, only for you to know that, off-screen, some new crew is waiting to do the exact same thing to them. Los Santos repeats it. The families in Ballas keep trading blocks, because the real constant isn't green or purple, it's the system underneath. Corrupt FIB agents like Steve Haynes, private security like Merriweather, tech parasites like Life Invader, and old money like the Madrazos all sit on top of the same machine. The city needs cheap labor, easy victims, and disposable soldiers, so it keeps spitting out new gangs whenever the old ones burn out. That's why every time a cartel gets wiped, some cousin in the background steps up. The Lost MC gets decapitated by Trevor during his intro, and a few years later in online you're already running into new biker chapters trying to fill the gap. In reality, the faces change, because the incentives don't. There's always another kid who sees fast money, another corrupt cop who looks the other way because the overtime pay is good. Your protagonists sit in the middle of that. Michael, Franklin, Trevor, Nico, CJ, all of them are wild cards. They speed the cycle up, they knock over the current kings, they help one faction for a while, then they walk away rich, dead, or broken. But they don't actually fix anything. The FIB is still corrupt after you rob it. The streets are still full of dealers after you clean out one corner. The game lets you feel like a wrecking ball without ever letting you be a cure. And then you've got the meta layer, which is where it gets kind of darkly funny. Who really matters in the GTA universe is decided by Rockstar, and by you. Whichever gang the camera follows becomes the legend for that era. The Lost MC are background noise in IV until the Lost and Damn pulls them into the spotlight. The families in GTA V barely move the city's economy, but because Franklin is tied to them, they feel important. This would make a lot more sense in the context of how online treats every new update as a new empire. CEO offices 1 year, nightclub kingpins the next, then drug labs, then gun-running bunkers. It's also revealed that as soon as a new DLC drops, last season's kings quietly become just another grind method. So who runs the GTA universe? The answer Rockstar keeps giving is nobody and the system. The gangs are chapters, not the book. The institutions, the money, and the player's attention are the only things that really persist. And if you keep following this series into the next game, you already know what's coming. A whole new set of gangs will show up, convinced they're untouchable, certain they finally own the city. Right up until the story starts and the baton gets ripped out of their hands again. And the funny part is, if you ain't sleeping right now, you just sat through all of that, like some invisible commissioner of crime history, watching gangs pop up and vanish while you never took a single bullet. You've basically walked in your head from early Liberty City alleyways to modern Los Santos freeways, past Grove Street tags, Lost MC clubhouses, Triad fronts, and those glass offices where GTA Online CEOs pretend they're legitimate. That alone kind of explains why your brain's still ticking instead of shutting down. So, Where do you actually fit in all this? If you had to drop yourself into the map, are you that quiet Grove Street loyalist, stuck on the cul-de-sac, refusing to change colors even when the set is clearly past its prime? The kind of player who still drives the green cars, still runs Franklin in hood outfits, and still circles Davis like it's 1992, and the families haven't already lost half their territory? Or maybe you're more of a triad strategist, the type who likes the idea of back rooms above noodle shops, counting cash while someone else does the messy part. In reality, the games barely let you play as them, but it's believed that every time you respect the rules, plan a heist perfectly, and walk away without a wanted level, you're basically role-playing that clean. Silent side of organized crime Rockstar only suggests in the background. You might be closer to a Madrazo-style fixer too. Not the guy kicking down doors, but the one on the phone, moving people like pieces. A text here, a bounty there, calling in Merryweather during a messy public lobby. It's also revealed that these are the players who treat GTA Online like a spreadsheet with explosions, watching the kill feed the way Martin probably watches his ledgers. Or you could be that GTA Online CEO archetype, the one running everything from behind tinted glass, while low-level grinders do warehouse runs at 3 in the morning. Every resupply you micromanage, every hostile takeover you trigger, just folds into this bigger pattern we've been talking about. People trying to carve out a tiny slice of power in a world that clearly doesn't care if they get wiped off the map. If you ain't sleeping, ask yourself quietly, why does this stuff feel so good to sink into? It's the mix of danger and loyalty, the way betrayal always sits one bad decision away, and the fantasy that, unlike most NPCs, you might actually beat the cycle. This would make a lot more sense in the context of real-life stress, but the game lets you keep it safely on a screen. And every time you load an old save or queue into a new session, you're adding one microchapter to this saga, one more drive-by, one more deal, one more silent night cruise past neighborhoods where, in reality, the gangs will reset as soon as you log off. So as this story slows down, let the city keep spinning without you for a while. The colors, the crews, the CEOs, they'll all still be waiting when you wake up, so you can let go for a bit. Los Santos doesn't need you to keep the lights on, and Liberty City is perfectly happy grinding away in the dark without anyone watching. These gangs were here before you loaded this save, and they'll be here after you back out to the dashboard. Out on Grove Street, the loop just keeps running. Ballas still post up by the cul-de-sac, leaning on cars that somehow never run out of gas. Purple bandanas catching that weird orange streetlight glow. Across the road, a couple of families' homies are still arguing on a porch, talking big about taking the block back, even though, in reality, they've been stuck in that same conversation since 2013. A car crawls past, bass low, nobody ever quite brave enough to pull the first shot unless you show up. Over in Davis and Rancho, Vagos bikes roll slow through yellow-tagged alleys, and a deal that never finishes keeps almost happening under a flickering sign. If you ain't sleeping yet, picture that from above, like you're pulling the camera up into the sky. The voices turn into little echoes, the colors blur into patches on the map, and it's believed that somewhere in the distance, a random NPC is still yelling about a plug who never arrives. Liberty City's doing the same thing on the other coast. A couple of lost MC guys are smoking outside a dingy clubhouse, pretending Johnny Klebitz never rode out into the desert, like that whole Trevor situation was just a bad dream. In a back room in Chinatown, Triads quietly count stacks on a plastic table. The only sound is bills snapping, and a TV playing some late-night show nobody is actually watching. Nothing dramatic, no big set piece, just business looping under a calm, cold sky. Vice City's neon is still buzzing too, even if you're only seeing it in your head. Some nameless coke crew is arguing on a balcony over who messed up the last shipment, and the ocean keeps making the same sound it made back when Tommy was running the place. It's also revealed that if you replay those old stories in your mind while you drift off, your brain will fill in all the missing details Rockstar never bothered to animate. You can always come back. Load an old save where Grove Street still has a little more green on it. Start a new character in online and pretend your low-level outfit is the next big thing until a Hydra ruins the vibe. Or just lie there and let the timelines overlap. San Andreas memories blending with Gita IV alleys and Gita IV freeways. If this kind of long-form lore is your thing, this is a long one in every direction. There are still more cities, more factions, more half-forgotten gangs that only show up in one mission and then vanish. This would make a lot more sense in the context of a bigger bedtime map, and we'll keep filling it in piece by piece. So let the music fade like you just hit pause. The minimap's still spinning, the colors are still out there, and the wars keep going quietly off screen while you finally get some sleep. If you somehow made it all the way here and you're still awake, you are absolutely the target audience for this kind of thing. You're the type who actually wants to know why the Ballas are still hanging around Davis after San Andreas, or why it's believed that the lost MC keep popping up like a bad save file across different games. These long, quiet dives are basically built for you, the people who remember that the Leone family once ran chunks of Liberty City. Then notice how, in reality, by Gita IV, they're just a name in the background while new crews like the Pegorinos scramble for scraps. The ones who clock that the families in GTAV are a spiritual echo of Grove Street. Not a perfect copy, but close enough that it still stings when you drive past that cul-de-sac and see purple on the block. So if you ain't sleeping and you want one more ride, you've got options. You can queue up another lore episode and let it roll while you drift, or you can just let autoplay decide which corner of the map you visit next. You could even boot the game back up tomorrow, cruise past the old family's territories, or replay a favorite gang storyline and see how much of this stuff you start noticing in the dialogue and the graffiti. If you're the type to min-max even your bedtime, you can quietly stack some karma for the channel too. A like or a comment, or dropping this to a friend who still argues about which version of the Triads was the most dangerous, actually explains to the algorithm that this is a long one worth serving to other lore goblins. Nothing you have to do, nothing urgent, just small background actions like a drive-by with blanks. If you feel like talking, you can also drop which gang you think had the most tragic fall. Was it Grove Street, losing everything before you even press start in San Andreas? The lost MC, decapitated in one ugly desert deal and then reduced to side quest cannon fodder? Or one of the old Liberty City mobs that went from kings of the commission to old men in back rooms while the new blood took their rackets? You can even call a comeback if you want. Like which crew you'd want Rockstar to resurrect in the next game. For now, this was just one long story among a lot of others running through the Gita universe. One thread in a huge knot of colors, corners, and quiet wars. Let the gangs fade back into the dark. Let the city hum without you for a while. And let the music take it from here.